Last night, I started off by researching Hooters getting bankrupted by private equity and ended up uncovering the next 2008 level economic collapse. And they're hiding the bubble inside a private equity black box that makes it almost impossible to see what they're doing.
So for them, the best course would be a slow kind of deflation of the bubble, a restructuring of the economy, a reset, and then job growth. And they're mostly going to focus on job growth, not the stock market. The stock market benefits the owners of financial assets more than the average citizen in the U.S. and really, frankly, anywhere. So that's the plan. It's going to take time, and it's not going to be easy. But I think it has to be done because since the Great Financial Crisis, the U.S. manufacturing base was already hollowed out, even further hollowed out, and it's a tale of two cities. It's the very poor get government benefits, and the very rich profit from the government spending.
Trump trying to purposefully send our economy into a recession? Is he trying to crash the economy? Now, at first you may say, that's crazy, conspiracy theory, it makes no sense, and there's lots of reasons. But it's not because Trump necessarily is a bad guy, or he's evil, or anything else that people want to say, but there's actually a reason that could be very true on why he would do this.
Welcome back to Resistance Chicks. We're your hosts, Leah and Michelle. You are joining us Tuesday night, March 18th, 2025. I want to get that date down because you're here for a very special report. 2008 was a year that most of us would like to forget. But I need you to go back and recall.
We are going down in the memory hole. We are going to remember.
We're going to remember. Did I just pull that out of there? We're going to remember because you're about to see it in all its glory again. This time, however, the crash that should have actually crippled the nation is going to do so. Now, I don't want to make you guys afraid. I don't want to send you into a tailspin or a panic. However, the British are coming. The British are coming. The British are coming.
I regret that I have but one life to give for my country, Nathaniel Hale. I just read that in my Founder's Bible today. Ain't nobody have to give their lives up. And I want you guys to understand, this is not a fear-mongering episode. This is actually a very highly educational episode. So
go get your pen, go get your paper, go get your little student hat on, and get ready to be edumacated.
Edumacated.
Encouraged.
Yes.
Empowered.
Knowledge.
I did 3 E's. Did you see what I did there?
Here's the thing. Knowledge is power.
Yeah.
Knowledge is power. And what you're going to learn tonight, you're going to say, I knew that.
I knew it.
2 words. Raise your hand if anybody in the chat knows what private equity is. Okay? You hear about it, but you don't know that you do. What is private equity? It's like the wind. You can't see the wind, only the effects of the wind. And when that wind comes in a predatory manner, as private equity managers do, the wind comes in the form of damaging wind, straight line winds, hurricane force winds, tornadoes. They promise a summer breeze and leave a path of devastation in their wake. We are on the cusp of a worldwide F5 tornado because of private equity managers. Now, maybe some of you know a little bit about what private equity is, but at its basis, it's just regular Joes funding things. Or is it? Actually, it's a little bit more complicated. So there are businesses that are publicly traded. And there are investments that are publicly traded, Ameriprise, things like that, publicly traded.
Yeah, but they're also actual trading companies.
Yes.
Ameriprise is a
So then there's these private equity groups. And they're a group of individuals that decide, I want to invest for people. I'm a smart guy.
Got it.
And I'm going to invest in buying things for other people and then I'm going to package that up, and I'm going to sell that to retirement funds.
Now, when you say buying things,
I'm going to buy stores. I'm going to buy nursing homes. I'm going to buy hospital things, actual brick and mortar things that produce money. Okay. Mostly retail businesses, buildings, things like that. There are private equity firms that buy up media, that buy up Megyn Kelly.
right?
Okay. But by and large, the focus of the economy right now and what is happening is that publicly traded companies used to be the investment firms, and they would invest in traditional investments. And I sound so smart, but I'm just watched a lot of YouTubes. Just I'm going to full disclosure here. I am not your investment portfolio manager.
This is not financial advice.
No, this is kind of what not to do, what they are doing. So, the, publicly traded investment firms stick with you can go and you can say, I would like risky investments. I'd like which would give me maybe a bigger return, but I could also lose.
Right.
Then you could stick with some, more placid investments.
It's the bull and bear market.
Okay. Stocks, bonds, the bonds market, and then often just regular stocks like my grandma had GM stocks and P&G stocks and, your Fortune 500 companies that actually don't yield a great amount, but they're steady. Okay. Well, bad guys like to make a lot of money.
Sure.
And they don't ever go anywhere. They just reconfigure and find another way. So you had slave owners, but the idea that you could take advantage of somebody, they didn't leave the planet. Okay? So what we do is when you try to legislate morality, it's like a toot. It just comes out.
Leah.
Okay? You can't.
Just did that?
You have to.
You just said that on the show?
Well, bad guys are going to bad guy, and the tutors are going to toot. Okay? That's what I'm going to tell you. Tutors are going to toot. Con artists are going to con. So people who would have the propensity to enslave another person and take more, there's a cake being cut and you got the kid that just dives right in and takes more than everybody else. Okay. They're just going to be there. And that's what Christianity does. That's not what Christianity does. That's why we need Christianity. Christianity helps us to gauge ourselves and to monitor our desires in a way that we don't take advantage of other people because God is watching. We want God to bless us.
Right.
We want God to be inside of us. So we do what's right because we want to please God, and we don't do what's wrong because we don't want to be on the other side of God's wrath. But if you're not teaching kids about Jesus, if you're not teaching them morality, George Washington and many of our founding fathers said religion and morality are necessary to good government, and encourage in the Northwest Ordinance that schools and means of education should forever be encouraged to teach Christianity and morality, because you don't have good government without it. You just have to constantly legislate morality. So the same mentality that crashed the stock market and rigged the markets in 1929, okay? The same mentality, actually, the warmongers of World War I and World War II. It's the same mentality. It's just making war on your fellow mankind in some way to take advantage of them. And then most recently, you had the 2008 crash, and we're going to take you down memory lane to remind you what happened. But in essence, there were some really bad loans being made, and the government should never be in home loans. Yeah, I got a little dusty on there. Government should never be in home loans, but there were a lot of really bad home loans. But it wasn't just bad home loans; people were cheating on the home loans, and then they were put in variable interest rates. So you're not locked in at a rate, and then the interest rate goes up, and you really didn't have the income before, and now you really don't have the income. So those loans were actually made by U.S. Bank or Chase Bank, and then they were packaged. So it's not a package. they say they were packaged up and they're sold. And
they
sold.
lump them together like bodies in a mass grave.
Yeah.
That's packaged.
And they
That's
bury
how they
them.
package them.
They bury them in with a set of good investments at the same time. Okay. So you've got a lot of retirement firms and things like that are buying these investments. And so actually it's just really hard to fathom and to understand that your fireman's retirement, your nurse's retirement, their pension funds are investing in these portfolios. So what's happening right now is private equity has these big guys who are promising huge returns. But from what I understand is you're not actually getting any better returns than just investing in your placid Fortune 500 stock market.
Right.
But the private equity gurus, I'm going to call them, the CEOs, they are so good at selling, and they're selling these products basically to the pension funds, and the pension funds are hoping to invest your money, your hard-earned money, into something that will have a return on your investment, so they can keep paying you dividends for what you have invested in throughout all the years, so that when you retire, you have this pension and it comes in, but it has to come from somewhere. It comes from investing in other things, right? So what is happening is a lot of these private equity firms, they don't care. They go in, they will purchase sometimes a healthy company, okay? And in purchasing a healthy company, the first thing that they do is they leverage the company for debt. And then the company has to pay that debt because now they own it. And it's as if somebody comes in, buys your house, and then puts a mortgage on your house, and you're living, and they're actually doing this right now. Have you heard this? People will buy your house for you and you pay rent to them.
Okay.
Because they'll give you, $150,000, $250,000 or whatever for your house. Okay. And then you pay rent back to them.
You're kidding.
So that you can have the money and live off of it.
No way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like a home equity line of credit, except for you don't own the house anymore.
And it's not, you can't even pay it off. Yeah. Because it's them who they own
your house.
And actually what's interesting is they pay all repairs. They'll pay everything. They'll landscape and everything, but they own the house and now you rent it.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that weird?
That's where we're at though. So we have so much to get to, you guys. I want to insert this because it sounds, I don't want you to leave. I don't want you to feel like you're going to get confused or overwhelmed. There's so much that we're going to give you.
Do you really think that I've already, I'm not finished.
No. But you just reminded me of something.
Okay.
Yesterday you had a phone call with someone from ITM Trading, and we'll tell you guys about that. And so we had a little tiny bit of inside information as far as what's going on financially. And I can tell you guys, it's not looking good. Everything on the surface, no one's talking about it because a lot of people are embarrassed about their financial situation. So you know who you hear talking about it the most are like the millennials or the kids just out of college.
I can't buy a house. I can't
pay rent, and they're starting to cry, and they're the only ones that are like, kind of ringing the alarm, like ding, 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 like, wait,
something
not there.
Right here. Y'all told me this.
But all of the adults in the room that are like, I'm fine. I just got a new credit card, and I'm just, I just put another $10,000 on my credit card because I ain't telling nobody nothing because my financial business and my business, and I'm not going to let people know because they all feel like somehow they're doing something wrong.
No, you're all just
drowning in the same.
You're drowning in the same pool,
right?
And so I want to talk to you guys tonight about. Why did Big Lots close down? Why did Joann Fabrics close down? Even I'm happy that Hooters shut down, but actually they were not in the red. Okay, Joann Fabrics had 97% of their stores were making a profit. But what happened was, and we're going to play a lot of clips tonight, that the private equity firms, they go in, they're like They're vultures.
Well, imagine it like an arranged marriage between two kingdoms. Like you take on the debt now of the kingdom that you've married. And so when these private equity companies come in and buy Joann, then Joann then takes on the debt essentially, or takes on the responsibility, meaning of whatever this private equity company is going to do to them.
So basically what the private equity firms are doing is just leveraging assets to go get loans and then go spend money.
Which is why they're probably getting these profitable companies, because the profitable companies will be a better collateral for them.
And the crazy part about it is that they don't have any qualms to liquidating these stores and things like that. They don't have any qualms. They make money off of it. Right? So this is the video. I'm going to start with this video that raised the alarm for me last night. The next 2008 is happening now. Party City, Joann's, Forever 21, Big Lots, all collapsing. This isn't just a retail struggling. We all thought it was because of COVID. They're struggling. They're struggling for actually, no, Joann Fabrics was doing really well. But it's so hard to fathom. This private equity firm buys Joann Fabrics and then just goes and takes out loans under their name.
That's why I said it's like a marriage, like somebody, you get married and then somebody goes and gets credit cards.
And then Joann Fabrics as the store has to pay it back.
I know.
And so literally they went bankrupt paying the interest on loans that they didn't need to take out in the first place as for a company.
It's unreal. Hang on one second.
And so the private equity guys are they're just getting rich. And you would think that it would be illegal. Mm-hmm. Okay, if you bought a house and burned it down for the insurance. But it's not illegal because the guys who are doing this are the ones setting up the laws.
Wow, exactly, because it benefits them.
Right? It benefits them. It's absolutely insane.
Here we go. I think I got the right one.
Okay, we have no volume.
It's not playing yet.
Okay.
Last night, I started off by researching Hooters getting bankrupted by private equity and ended up uncovering the next 2008 level economic collapse. And they're hiding the bubble inside a private equity black box that makes it almost impossible to see what they're doing. Almost. This time, they're not going to collapse the banks and make it too big to fail. They're going to bankrupt the entire American pension system. I'm almost too afraid to make this video, but it has to be done, so let's get into it. In 2008, investors and bankers were able to crash the world's economy by engaging in risky, unethical bets and investments, and they did it right out in the open. They've learned, and this time they're doing it again. Bigger investments, bigger risks, same playbook, but they're doing it behind the smokescreen of private equity in bigger numbers. They're creating a bigger bubble than before, and it's not somewhere down the road. It's here, and it's about to pop. You see, for the last month, I've been trying to figure out why these companies that private equity had acquired were failing even though they were still succeeding. Joann's, 97% of their stores are still profitable, and yet they're still bankrupt. But they weren't bankrupt a year ago, and they still had the debt that private equity had stacked on them a year ago. So I wanted to know what changed. The same thing with Hooters. The same thing with... Now, in 2024, private equity bankrupted 110 businesses. And that was almost double their previous record. There had been huge increases in the amount of bankruptcies each year over the past 3 years. But I didn't know what had changed because private equity had held many of these businesses for several years and they were still succeeding. Until I got my hands on an economic report and an article and found a term that nobody could explain to me. The term was back floating rate loans. I didn't know what that meant, and no article would explain it to me. So I had to go and do research in the financial prospectuses of a bunch of financial investment firms. Guys, in the last few years, private equity has taken out $3.8 trillion in adjustable rate loans. These are adjustable rate loans. These private equity firms took out adjustable rate loans. And so for the last 3 years, as our interest rates have gone up, every 30 to 60 days, the money due on the loans they stacked on top of these companies has gone up every 30 to 60 days. That's why these successful companies that private equity had acquired are suddenly bankrupt, even though they're still making money. They're bankrupt because they're paying adjustable rate loans. But it doesn't stop there. It gets so much worse, because my next question is, why are the banks willing to give these risky loans to these private equity firms knowing it's going to cause them to fail? And the answer is because the banks aren't going to keep them on their books. The banks are immediately repackaging these adjustable rate loans as something called CLOs, right? Which are then packaged and sold off to our pension funds as really great.
Quick. So what she means by, and I've had to listen to it a couple times, is that the banks, even when they're, you think that you owe the bank that you got a loan from for your home, you don't. It's very hard to negotiate mortgages and missed payments and things, because you can't just go back down to Joe Smith as the banker down the street anymore. As soon as they are making these loans,
They sell them off.
They sell them off.
It used to be the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and now it's even bigger than that.
And so the banks right now making these loans for these other businesses, they are selling them off to the pension funds and such the like.
Debt. And they tell them that it's a diversified portfolio. Are you hearing The Big Short in real time? Literally, all of these companies are getting bankrupted in greater and greater numbers. And all of this debt is adjustable rate. And all of the bankruptcies are skyrocketing in this direction. And now, if you look at this graph, you can see that aside from 2020, which is obviously an anomaly, right now, private equity, that's the yellow section, has double the highest number of bankruptcies they'd ever had prior to last year. And that number is climbing this year, $3.8 trillion. $3.8 trillion in this debt, okay? I want you to look back to 2008. Do you want to know how many risky adjustable rate mortgages there were? $1.1 trillion. Do you want to know how many subprime but not quite as bad loans there were? $1.3 trillion. That was just in housing. In the $3.8 trillion held by private equity, they own the largest shares of the home ownership market in the United States, but they also own the daycares. They own the veterinary clinics. They own the pet stores. They own the nursing homes. They own the emergency rooms. They own the doctor's offices, the orthodontists. They own the builders. They own the HVAC companies. This isn't just housing. It's going to touch every single industry around us. And that is why, if this were a free market and private equity had not exploitatively gotten involved, if we had a free market and we could see what they were doing, these companies would be succeeding. If this were actually a free market, these companies would be succeeding. Joann has 97% of their stores profitable. That is an astronomical number. 97% of a retail store is profitable. And they are failing, and they are closing every store, and it is further consolidating an already consolidated environment. And now there are thousands and thousands of employees that will not have jobs, and there are thousands of other businesses that are going through the exact same thing right now. And why? Because they know we will never allow the banks to be bailed out again. We would literally riot in the streets. But we're definitely going to allow them to bail out the pensions, because that's our grandparents. That's our parents. That's the working class. They know that this will get bailed out. And because there's no regulatory authority, there are no laws stopping private equity from doing whatever they want, they know they can get away with it. And we can't do anything to stop them.
Not done. She just learning how to do videos, and they just kind of, it's a little bit buggy.
Okay.
What you need to understand is this wasn't done by accident. This was done by blatant, intentional greed. The private equity firms wanted the cheapest debt they could get, and they believed arrogantly that the debt would stay cheap forever. They had 0% interest rate loans for ages. And so they took on these adjustable rate notes thinking they could keep refinancing forever out of it. It was arrogant. But it also meant that they got to collect bigger fees because they were taking risky debt that cost less. The bankers were happy to give them because they got higher fees on offering bad debt. They were going to get paid no matter what. At the same time, the private equity firms mandated in their contracts with these companies they acquired that they were advisors and that they were a management company. So they also get paid that way. And then they sold the land out from under these companies and all their assets and made themselves whole before any of this even began. They're already cash positive. The banks knew they wouldn't be held accountable because they were going to bundle it up and pass it off to the pensions. And even the pensions were reckless because they're buying these mechanisms because When you purchase into private equity, when you purchase private equity debt as a pension, you get to put on your books, especially if you have an underfunded pension, the projected gains for 10 years, which means for 10 years, it looks like that pension is more shored up than it is. And at the end of that 10 years, when it's time for that fund to close out, suddenly then all of the bad debt comes crashing down on the pension. But at that point, there's a new leader on the pension fund and they've kicked the can down the road. So even they were reckless. But at the bottom of all of this is the bankrupting of the fabric of our society. We are losing our businesses. We are losing our doctors. We are losing our orthodontists. We are losing our nursing homes. We are losing our funeral homes. And one by one, they're going to fall under the weight of this really horrible adjustable rate debt. And nobody is talking about it. I could only find 2 articles in very obscure financial magazines that even talk about these back floating rate loans. I have never been more terrified. And I talk about private equity a lot. I have a lot to say. But right now, all I want to do is get someone to pay attention that can make a difference in this, because we have a problem. We're not without any hope at all. Right now, private equity is only allowed to be this exploitative because they exist under something called the carried interest loophole, something that multiple Congresses have tried to close, but private equity continues to bribe politicians to fail to actually achieve. Trump, 3 weeks ago, said he wanted to close the carried interest loophole. I thought he was doing it as a fundraising maneuver. But he's doubled down on it repeatedly. If we can make enough noise about this, maybe we can get him to actually see it through and end private equity's stranglehold on our population. There's so much more that we have to go through, so this is going to be a multi-part series. But if you're new here, my name is Tiffany. We work together to fight private equity and save small businesses in our community, and it's going to take every single one of us to do so. So do all the things and stick around. So
good job.
So she was really good, Michelle. I want you to scroll down in her thread here. She has a few visuals to see. This is representative of Toys R Us. I think Toys R Us was one of the first, companies to go under, and we just all thought that people were buying toys online. The same thing happened with Toys R Us. They were bought by a private equity firm. The private equity firm took out a ton of money, and Toys R Us was spending millions and millions of dollars just on interest for loans that the company took out in their name. So the solution is to borrow more money. Don't worry about all of that. Here's one. I pay a higher tax rate than this guy, and that's true here. Trump, are you watching? You say you closed the carried interest loophole. If you want to bring private equity to heel, now is your chance. Are you going to stop it? The media isn't covering this. Regulators aren't stopping it. Politicians are protecting it, but you can expose it. It's 2018 all over again. You snatch up companies and bury them in debt. You suck out a quick profit and strand the bondholders and employees. Why would anyone lend you money? Our reputation.
That's the private equity companies.
Mm-hmm. I'm not going to play that one. Let's see. Let's go to Trump wants to close the loophole that makes this possible. This entire scam relies on a rigged tax code, the carried interest loophole. Private equity firms get taxed less than teachers and firefighters. Trump says he'll close this loophole. So when you see this, I know this is a lot to take in. The reason why, and when we watched The Big Short, we talked about this with Rafi. I couldn't remember the name, but now it's The Big Short. It's so confusing. Why is it so confusing? Because they have to hide what they are doing. Then they make up names for what they're doing, okay? So the share of the profits paid to the investment manager, how this works, private equity or hedge fund, they get 20% of all the profits that are going to these invest as an investment. They just right off the top get 20%. Okay, the remaining profits go to the investors, but right off the top they get 20%. So why is this controversial? The carried interest loophole. Capital gains are taxed less than your actual ordinary income. So these guys, their investment is taxed at a lower rate than you work every day really hard, and you have a higher tax rate. It is their job, though. It's their job. Okay. So that's just a few things that Tiffany put together, and I really appreciate what Tiffany put together. Now, I want to talk to you guys about, give you an idea about what the what private equity actually looks like. And I think it is going to be, is it this one? No, let me see here. It's this one. The Corrupt World of Private Equity. Will you play that?
Sure.
You can do like 1, 2, 5.
We're talking about a big circle of pain that enriches a very small group of people.
John Bauer belonged to a school group that in 2008 was acquired by private equity. And 5 years later, that school filed for bankruptcy.
Simmons was once a thriving mattress store until they sold to private equity. The debt soared, they laid off thousands, and the police kicked all employees out of the factory.
They made $750 million in profit from this.
It's almost as if the more destruction this industry creates, the more profit the equity managers get.
Is this the most corrupt industry in the world?
Or
simply a way to cut the fat off a business?
I started investigating private equity when I heard these two famous investors throw a warning out there.
Private equity funds, the returns are really not calculated in a manner that I would regard as honest.
Or all they're doing is lying a little bit to make the money come in.
Which, well, if it's so bad, why do they keep this industry going? The answer, though, becomes very clear.
When I was in business school, there was nothing sexier in this entire world than private equity. It's exactly where you went if you wanted to one day own an island. And one of my classmates just bought an island.
Private equity is extremely lucrative, not for employees, not for investors, and basically not for anyone involved, except for the private equity managers.
Those who run these firms have amassed personal fortunes in the billions of dollars.
I've spent the past 50 days going deep into this industry, and I stumbled upon something that very few people know about. Who do you think funds this industry to keep it going? You'll never guess, because it might just be the very person staring back at you in your screen. Ah, you don't believe me, do you? Or do you know exactly where your pension money is invested right at this moment? Private equity is not a topic as complex as you may think. Equity means business, private means not available to buy on the public market. So private equity is simply a group of people that invest in private businesses. It sounds like a rather harmless process, but you need to go a bit deeper. Once private equity buy these target businesses, they go about making changes. Like a house flipper, but they flip businesses. And this is where all the problems come in.
These equity firms buy up and plunder businesses, refusing to reinvest, slashing staff, and often driving companies into bankruptcy. The object is not to sustain businesses, but to harvest them for assets.
In 2003, private equity company Thomas H. Lee acquired Simmons Mattress Limited. At the time, Simmons was a thriving company with 100 years of history to it, but it was all about to change.
The employees, the biggest perk that they sort of work for at this company was upon retirement, they would get a free mattress set. And unfortunately, that perk was taken away last year.
Simmons always gave an employee that retired a new set of beddings.
We asked them about the people that want to retire, and would you still give them that mattress? And they still said, no, we're not giving you nothing.
Okay, taking away the small bonuses for years and years of hard work, yeah, that's pretty petty, but what happened next was another level. Private equity decided to outright fire all of the employees who worked for the unionized plants.
September 18th, 2008. As workers arrived for the day shift, they were called into a meeting. Due to a drop in sales, they were told the plant would be closed.
After they closed the doors, the morale was low. The morale went down. People didn't know what they were going to do, where their next check was going to come from, where their meals was going to come from, how their mortgage and stuff was going to get paid.
But the process that they used to fire these employees shows the true sense of their character. The police were called to kick the employees out of their own workplace.
It really was a hostile ending. Anytime you close a plant and you bring police to the plant.
But not everyone at Simmons was treated like this. The top management at the firm had a completely different experience.
The CEO, Charlie Idle, had country club dues fees paid, had the captain of his yacht paid for 1 year, received thousands of dollars in free mattresses each year, along with, great salary, bonus, and equity stake in the company.
Yeah, Simmons' CEO was rewarded handsomely, but this was nothing compared to what private equity got. Thomas H. Lee Partners sold the company for $77 million in profit. They collected hundreds of millions in special dividends. It paid itself millions more in fees for running the company. All up, they walked away with $750 million through the Simmons deal. And if you think this is just a one-off scenario with private equity, you might want to think again.
These private equity firms, like an invasive species, are ubiquitous.
There are a number of companies that are in Simmons' position, hundreds of companies across the country that have a ton of debt that have been put on their balance sheet.
The wreckage they orchestrate is taken out on workers who lose jobs or see salaries and benefits slashed.
Toys R Us, a once beloved toy store, got purchased by billionaire Henry Kravis's private equity firm in 2005. 12 years later, they shut down after huge debt was thrown on the company. 33,000 employees lost their jobs. KKR and others made $250 million from fees.
In 2023 alone, 104 American private equity and venture capital-backed companies filed for bankruptcy.
In fact, over 2 decades, ending in 2020, there were 542,000 jobs lost because of private equity firms buying them.
This single industry seems to cause so much damage. The question is, why? Well, it's all in the way that private equity is designed. To invest in these private businesses, private equity needs money, but only a small amount. Why? Because they have this superpower called leverage. When a person buys a house, they borrow money from the bank. Normally 80% is borrowed, and they put down 20% of their own money. Private equity, they do the same thing, except with 3 differences. They buy a business, not a house. They don't put the debt in their own name, they put it in the acquired business's name. And 3, they borrow to a much greater extent. $5 million can be turned into $100 million, and then they can buy whatever the heck they want. This allows them to cast their nets deep into day-to-day society.
Outside of financial circles, many people don't realize the scope and influence of the private equity industry.
The degree to which private equity touches our lives in ways that we're not aware of.
Here's just a few examples of private equity-owned businesses.
Subway, Barnes & Noble, 1/3 of Europe's soccer teams, a Formula One team, California Pizza Kitchen, Hooters, Adweek, Neiman Marcus, FanDuel, Highways in India, the music of Taylor Swift, hospital emergency rooms, gastroenterology clinics.
The number of brands is astonishing.
Private equity touches areas of people's lives that 99% are not aware of. But with this story, there's a rather personal twist. In order for private equity to borrow money, they need to put some of their own money up front. Like when we borrow a house, you need a down payment. Plot twist, they don't use any of their own money. The money that they use is your money. Your pension savings that you need for retirement. It might be hard to imagine, but there's a good chance it's currently invested in private equity.
What most people don't realize is we, all of us, in one way or another, actually are invested in many private equity deals.
But it doesn't make sense. How the heck can we have money in private equity if we've never chosen to put money in private equity? The answer is because it was never your choice. It's the choice of your pension fund. And your pension fund, well, where do you think they often choose to invest? I'll give you a clue. It's not the S&P 500.
Out of the top 10 pension funds in the country, 8 invested more than 45% of their total capital in private equity.
California State Teachers Retirement System and CalPERS alone invested $46.7 billion and $46.2 billion in private equity, respectively.
Alongside college endowments and institutional investors, your pension fund helps fund private equity.
Our pension funds give them billions of dollars in fees.
That money that teachers, nurses, and doctors need for when they stop working, a portion is in private equity right now. And some of you may be horrified that your money is going towards such a corrupt industry, but I'm sure there's a group of you that are secretly happy because you think it's making you a lot of money. Not so quick. Private equity is not designed to make the investor wealthy. Don't be silly. It's designed to make the private equity company wealthy. It's written on Investopedia that PE firms seek to earn returns that are better than the public equity markets. Now, given the honesty, the shining example of virtue that we've seen from private equity, do you think they actually beat the market?
The marketing pitch is that these private equity investors are geniuses and are beating the public markets by leaps and bounds. When you dig a little deeper, when you lift up the rocks, you find out that these kinds of claims are untrue.
The professor of finance at Oxford, Ludwig Philippou, and several others make the case that private equity funds do not clearly outperform other asset classes. Instead, private equity has given investors performance that basically matches public stock indexes.
I really haven't got any evidence that you are going to do better with the money than you do in an index fund.
The research shows that private equity do not outperform the public stock market. Depending on what you look at, the returns from an index fund either match the returns you get by investing in private equity or beat them. But there's a key difference between these two investments. Let's just say there's a reason why private equity has been nicknamed as
the billionaire factory.
The price that people pay to invest with PE is enormous. A passive index fund normally charges fees around 0.1% of total money invested. Private equity charge 2% on all invested. That's 20 times more than index funds. But they don't stop here. On top of this, they charge an extra fee where they take 20% of all profits that are made every year. This is the infamous 2 and 20 fee structure. It's no surprise that Warren Buffett has been warning about this for years.
It's a very one-sided deal, and why in the world can you ask for 2 and 20 when you really haven't got any evidence that you are going to do better with the money than you do in an index fund?
Heads, PE wins. Tails, well, PE also wins. And then you think, Well, how does private equity get away with offering these mediocre returns for crazy price tags? If Walmart started selling t-shirts for $500 a pop, no one would buy it. And that's when you discover that private equity have complete control on how they report their returns.
They literally chose how they account back to investors.
It certainly didn't come as a shock when I found out that their reporting was very deceitful.
Private equity funds, the returns are really not calculated in a manner that I would regard as honest.
Cambridge Associates calculated that returns reported by private equity can be as much as 3% higher than the actual figure. Their results, well,
it's not as good as it looks.
You see, private equity's first job is to secure large investments from investors. Once armed with these funds, their strategy involves two key moves: acquiring businesses and keeping the remainder of the money in safe government bonds. However, with these low-risk bonds, private equity don't let it lie dormant. They quietly extract a fee from these holdings, subtly adding to their profits. But when it comes time to report their overall returns to investors, they conveniently leave out the low yields that these bonds get, even though these bonds are clearly a part of the money invested. So when calculating the fees, they report the low-risk bonds, but when calculating their returns, the low-risk bonds are not reported. The only thing that is reported is the high yields made from acquiring businesses. It's called selective accounting, and it makes their performance appear far more impressive than it actually is.
Where all they're doing is lying a little bit to make the money come in.
Yes, Charlie, that's a succinct way of putting it. But who are these companies that are doing this, quietly extracting fees and then lying about their returns? They love to operate in the shadows, so let's do something they hate: bring them into the light. Blackstone, a $158 billion market cap company. KKR, the company that infamously bought Toys R Us, loaded it to the gills with debt. And funny, we no longer hear about Toys R Us anymore. Shamrock Capital. Celebrities, probably not the people we want to feel sorry for, but remember when Taylor Swift had to remake her own music because she didn't own it? Well, who do you think owns it? Henry Kravis, founder of KKR, multi-billionaire. Steven Schwarzman, CEO of Blackstone, net worth $37 billion. Leon Black, former chairman of Apollo Global Management, net worth $10 billion. If you're in the private equity game, odds are you're in the money. But the companies that these guys acquire, they're not in the money. Instead, essentially, they get rolled by the money.
The acquired company is loaded up with debt. What does that mean? How does the acquired company get loaded up with debt?
These private equity firms don't use all of their own money to buy the company outright. What they do is they have the company raise debt in the public markets. And so it's not like the private equity firm pays 100% of the transaction to buy the company. What they end up doing is putting down a very small amount, but raising debt on the back of that company to pay for the transaction.
There are many examples where this debt has completely broke the back of these companies.
If you could buy a house and borrow all of that money not under your name, but the house's name, how many homes would you buy? And you're probably an ethical person. Now, do you think these corporate-bred, money-hungry managers are being conservative with their borrowing, with their business acquisitions? Not a chance. So it's no surprise that private equity seem to be growing more powerful than ever.
The number of U.S. companies that are publicly held has declined by 50% since the late 1990s. Meanwhile, private equity funds flourished during that period, soaring from fewer than 1,000 to nearly 4,000. As a result, PE-owned companies have outnumbered publicly owned companies since around 2012.
What's perhaps most scary about all of this is that while private equity are more prominent than ever, still very few people know about the industry. How many people walking through the streets do you think have even heard
So just
of private
pause that
equity?
real quick.
And then you look around
the
and see how many
difference there,
businesses
yeah, we almost have just a little bit left. Go ahead and finish it then.
those people go to are owned by private equity. So if no one knows about it, how will things ever get better? Or maybe the answer is, it never will. Whenever things get bad, they'll change the name of the industry like they've done in the past and start from a clean slate, but actually continue to do the same thing.
I don't think we're going to see the industry of private equity change anytime soon.
Or if by chance we get lucky and, like certain banks did in 2008, it implodes. Not from the outside, not from activism, but from within.
That's the implosion that we're talking about, and that video wasn't even about the variable interest rates on those loans. Now, two things to point out towards the end of that video. You'll notice that it's not traditional funding that they're getting, as they're not raising capital in the stock market. So when something goes public, like when Facebook went public, it really got trashed. And now Facebook is trashed right now because they've got so many ads, and but it's a public company. It was a private company, but it wasn't a private equity company. It was just a private company.
Right.
So Joann's is a private company. I'm guessing it was probably traded on the stock market. If I had to guess, I don't know. But then it's not traded anymore on the stock market. It's not a public company anymore. Mm-hmm. It's now owned, and all of its profits are now owned by a small group of people and in the pension who have the pension funds, right? So now it's this private equity fund, right? And then you buy into the fund, and how well the fund does on if they own Big Lots and they own, it's interesting enough, Frisch's. Okay. So our local Little Big Boy was bought in 2015 by a private equity firm. That's what happened to Frisch's. Every company closing down now is because of the private equity firms.
So this is so sad. So you guys, if you live in the West Coast, you may have heard of Bob's Big Boy, but here on the East Coast and specific to Ohio and Cincinnati, we have what's called Frisch's Big Boy, and it's essentially a hometown diner feel with burgers and fries. And we grew up going to it, and they have a buffet that they do every Sunday morning for church.
A salad bar.
And they have a salad bar that you can, and it's just like, there's things about it that are just wonderful and like feel good, amazing. And they have all started to close down one by one, and we were all thinking like, how is it possible that Frisch's, it's a Cincinnati name brand, you know, they even sell like the Frisch's tartar sauce because it's like world famous in the grocery store. How could it go belly up? Because
so in 2015 they this private equity firm bought it, and then the actual owners they had no control over they took out a ton of debt and they remodeled and they changed the menu, right? And the food for me wasn't very good anymore, but I thought that's why Frisch's went down and under, but no, it's they leveraged this giant debt. They took out this huge amount of debt, and then they're having to pay it back. I think I have an article up about that because I was curious, and people have been saying things about that for a while.
Well, they kept saying that Frisch's was mismanaging their funds, but I'm thinking to myself like, wow, who got in charge of that? Because Bob's Big Boy is still doing fine on the West Coast, as far as I know. They're just flourishing.
Yeah.
You know, and they are an affiliated company.
Right. Yeah.
And so I was just kind of really sad. And now it all makes sense.
In 2014, Frisch's Big Boy was operating 95 corporate stores and 26 franchises. The number of restaurants remained unchanged between 2011 and 2015, and sales was growing at a rate of about 1% per year.
That's awesome.
The company was traded publicly on the Amex Stock Exchange and traded at a net about $16 a share in 2013. Consumer preferences also started shifting towards healthier foods. Needless to say, Frisch's struggled to adapt to their burgers and chocolate cake. By the time the Mayers were nearing retirement age, they owned 16% of the Frisch's combined, the Frisch's family, and seemed to be searching for a way out. No one else in the family seemed ready or capable of taking over the company. Moreover, the treasurer of Frisch's embezzled a whopping $3 million, and one of its auditors issued an adverse opinion on its financial controls. In 2014, an activist hedge fund, AOF Management, took a 5% stake and began to exert pressure on the board in an attempt to show better returns for investors. The stock price climbed about $25 per share because of activist investment and rumors of a potential sale. To try to understand both the financial structure of Frisch's and the assumptions driving their stock price, I reviewed financial statements prior to 2015. About 95 corporately owned restaurants existed back then. These corporately owned stores averaged sales of about $2 million per year and at a cost of sales of about 89%, which left $240,000 per year in gross margin per store. A total of 25 franchise-owned stores contributed on an average of $55,000 in net per year. And I'm going to go down a little bit. So in 2015, Frisch's was bought out. And the deal was for $34 per share on 5.1 million shares, or $174 million. And then, let's see.
So then they built the new Frisch's.
Mm-hmm. They built the new Frisch's. And then COVID happened. And then so who lost? The one who engineered most of the deal did not exit well. They most likely lost all or most of their initial $9 million in investment. And paid $176 million and only collected $44 million in rent. While they still own the land and buildings, it's hard to say when, if ever, these buildings would be occupied and provided rent again. So, when you take out, it's a sad thing to see a business go down like that. But I would say even more so is for the Joanns and the Big Lots and some of the others that went down recently. Let's see here. Let's go to NBC News. Retail stores facing thousands of closures in 2025.
For people who love to shop at Joann, the fabric store with about 800 locations around the U.S., time is running out.
I just finished a quilt and I said, oh my God, where am I going to go now?
You like to go in and touch and feel and look and colors.
Look
see
at the
if
parking
it matches
lot.
Things when
It's
you're
full.
making stuff. You can't do that online.
But now the one-time largest fabrics retailer in the country, which has some 19,000 employees, is closing all of its stores.
I'm going to be sorry to see this go.
It's just part of what's expected to be a record-setting year of 15,000 retail store closures, with Party City, Big Lots, Walgreens, and Macy's just some of the companies shuttering locations.
We've got policy upheaval with tariffs. We've got demand upheaval in terms of competition.
John Mercer is the head of global research at Coresight, a firm focused on technology's impact on retail.
It's not how much consumers are spending, it's all the other factors around retail.
Yeah, we think it's the context. We think consumer spending is pretty strong. It's where that spending goes.
Massive summer sheen haul.
He says online discount retailers like Temu and Shein are eating into many brick-and-mortar businesses as shoppers grow frustrated with poor customer service and locked up goods in stores. They're also chasing the cheapest prices. Adding to the trouble for retailers, Americans are growing more pessimistic about the economy. The Consumer Confidence Index released today down almost 7%, the biggest monthly decline in almost 4 years. Record number of store closures expected this year raises the question, what's to become of the real estate occupied by the retailers in all this upheaval? Lester?
Thanks for
That's
watching.
a great
Stay updated.
question. I want to go ahead and play. Will you play this YouTube? This girl here. It's a 3 from the left.
People love Joann's. So why is it closing? Well, a lot of it has to do with private equity. In December of 2010, the private equity firm Leonard Green & Partners offered to buy Joann's for $1.6 billion. In March of 2011, Joann's shareholders voted to approve the sale, making the public company private. Before Leonard Green & Partners took over, Joann's had reported record profits. The company's stock was trading at around $45. It was set to open 60 new stores and had no outstanding debt. A decade later, Joann's re-entered the market at $12 a share and then promptly filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, citing over $1 billion in debt. That $1 billion should sound familiar because it's the same money from the private equity sale in 2011. You see, when private equity firms purchase companies, the firm doesn't take on the debt. Instead, the private equity firm borrows money on behalf of the company it's buying in order to buy it, saddling the company, not the firm, with the debt, resulting in the fact that companies bought by private equity are far more likely to file for bankruptcy. In the retail sector alone, private equity has been responsible for over 600,000 job losses since 2013. In fact, months before the Joann sale in 2010, Leonard Green & Partners bought J. Crew for $3 billion. Under the private equity firm's ownership, consumers complained of declining quality. By May of 2020, J. Crew had filed for bankruptcy, primarily due to the debt it accrued from the buyout a decade earlier. So it's no wonder, really, that Joann's announced in January that it was filing for bankruptcy again. Its second time in under a year. Only this time, the company will be closing all 800 of its stores. Joann's employs over 19,000 people. People love Joann's.
There it is. So that is the rub. You and I cannot go and be like, you know what? I'm just gonna go buy Lowe's. And then I have no money to buy Lowe's. But I'm gonna take out money in the name of Lowe's to buy Lowe's. And then now it's mine.
Right.
And then all profits, I'm just gonna, take 20% of that. And there's more to this, whereas
So what's happening, I want to explain to you guys in more simple terms. What's happening is the question you would ask, like you and I as normal human beings, you would ask yourself like, man, if you just bought a company that's doing really well, why wouldn't you keep the company? Why run it to the ground? Why strap it with all of this debt? Like what's the point if you've just now bought a company that does really well? Okay. if you're just joining us, maybe you missed the fact that these private equity companies are paying themselves millions and millions of dollars in fees. And so the scam or the scheme is in the fees that they get, and that the company can't really afford to pay the private equity companies these fees.
No, that's the scam, is the fees. And then when the company goes, they owe nothing. The company just goes bankrupt. But meanwhile, they took, $20-30 million in fees.
Exactly. And so the company goes bankrupt, but the private equity company does not go bankrupt.
Exactly.
They're insulated from it.
It's insane.
Because Joann Fabric is the one that took out the debt. Right? And it's just like, and that's the thing about bankruptcy, right? Bankruptcy means that you don't have the money to pay it back.
Right.
So, but where is that money going? It's not just thin air money. Someone is suffering. Yeah. So we're not just talking about the loss of 16,000 jobs.
The loss of that goes to the pension fund that bought it. The bank doesn't have the money anymore. It's the pension fund that has it.
Exactly.
And you're not getting a profit. So it may not.
So the backs of Americans are eating these badges. It should be illegal. It is illegal, by the way, according to the Constitution.
But you don't feel it. You just see it as, I'm not getting as big of a dividend. Because here's the thing. It's just, if $1 billion has to be wiped off the books, then across how many millions of people, it's not, they're not going to notice it until they notice it.
So guys, I know we're not even into Leah's show yet, and there's a lot more left to come, but I just have to get this out here. Okay. I'll include myself in this boat. We love the idea of the lifestyles that we live. We do not live, Americans especially, the poorest Americans don't even understand that they live so much better than poor people around the world. Like, poor people around the world would look at the poor people in America and go, I wish I lived like they did. Okay. We are so spoiled. You know that it used to be that poor people couldn't afford cell phones. And now every single person has a cell phone. It's almost like an entitlement. Like, you have to have a cell phone, like you have to have food.
Yeah.
Okay. So when Lee and I are always talking about the system and why the system is wrong, and you see Patriot Gallery's posts and you're like scratching your head, and how can all of this be so wrong? And how can it be so evil? And why is she always hammering it? It's because of things like this. It's called theft. The system that exists, that only exists when they decoupled the dollar from gold and silver.
Yeah.
And it started even before they decoupled it. It started in 1913 with the creation of the Federal Reserve. Before that, none of this was possible. This kind of theft. The system is so complex now that it's difficult to understand what all of these companies are doing. And their decisions are having global ramifications of collapsing the economy in different countries. And it's going to be a global economic collapse, not just in America. Okay. And it's the very system that allows you, forgive me for saying this, I'll say us, even though we've never taken out a home loan, but it allows us to be able to buy now and pay as you go. That is not normal. That is not every movie from the 1930s and 40s where you got like every family, like the Waltons. What did they do when they needed a new cook stove? Okay, I remember this episode very vividly. They saved up money. They worked hard, okay, and then they would buy a thing. We don't live that way anymore, okay? You want a car? You can pay for it over the next 10 years. You want a house? You can pay for it over the next 30 years. Get your house now. You don't have to save. Why wait? You could have this now. We do it with everything. Everything. You go into the store, you go to buy a new computer. Oh, we'll just get a credit card and you can pay it off over. I mean, this. You need a new air conditioner. You need a new this. You need a new that.
It's not to make you feel guilty.
No, this is not to make you feel you're trapped in this system, by the way, because then society says you have to have these things. And so that's why we're saying that it has to stop. That's why we say it's sinful. You may be trapped in like a slave to the system, but the very system is forcing you to sin because you have to rob from somebody else while you're being robbed, right? You've been robbed, so now you have to go and rob. So that's what I'm saying. Like when we look at this system, and it's like I really wish that I'm not that old, but I feel like sometimes I have a memory that goes back beyond those that are 10, 20, and 30 years older than me. Because I remember times that weren't like this. I remember when the system wasn't this corrupt, but you didn't know that you were a frog in boiling water, and it was getting more and more. And I was thinking about this today, and this is for another show, so I won't get into it too deep. And I know Leah's got a big show here. Something has happened in the last 10 years where everything is so scary big. And what I mean by that is the market in everything is flooded. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing, but it feels yucky to me. It's like you want one thing and you have 1,000 options of that thing. And it used to not be that way. And now because of the internet, you have the ability to get that thing, whether it's even news, whether it's, certain products or whatever. I was looking up research for my beard oil that I'm trying to produce for the shop.resistancechicks.com. And then all of a sudden, all of my ads on social media are for beard oils. And I'm going, oh my gosh, there are 20,000 companies making beard oils. Who knew? You know what I mean? It's like everything is just flooded with so much stuff, with so much. This is not normal. And the only thing that makes it possible is the corrupt fiat system. And it's not just fiat in that when we look at these paper dollars, we say, oh, the paper dollar is evil in and of itself. No, it's not evil. It's the system that perpetuates the use of it that is evil, that is robbing and doing what these private equity. And you know what? Guess what? It ain't just the private equity companies that are this corrupt.
No.
By the way, we're just featuring them tonight.
Featuring them tonight, yeah.
I'm ready for your next.
The spectacular rise and collapse I think this is the one I have up. Is this the one I have up?
The rapid growth of private equity has been blamed for pretty much every problem in America today, from mass layoffs to unaffordable homes. Some of this hate is totally justified, and some of it is just coming from second-generation Wharton grads who didn't land a summer internship at Blackstone. Whatever your reason is for hating private equity, you will be happy to know that after a meteoric rise, the whole model that this industry was based on is now facing a wild collapse.
And I really do think that when you have a group sitting as a state pension fund,
where all they're doing is lying a little bit to make the money come in.
Yeah, that sums it up.
That's because that borrowed money becomes the responsibility of the company.
Well, private equity
not the private
is
equity.
Among the most malevolent sources in American economic life and global economic life.
Private equity is very simply any investment into assets not listed on public markets. There are hundreds of thousands of highly profitable and promising businesses in America and millions around the world that you would never be able to buy using Robinhood and some pocket money. Private companies are not listed on public exchanges and don't have the same reporting requirements, so it can be extremely difficult and time-consuming for investors to get a good idea if a business is worth buying and how much it would be worth if it is. This is where private equity firms stepped in as middlemen to offer rich investors access to this untapped market. If you were a billionaire or the manager of a pension fund, their pitch to you was simple. They could give you a higher average investment return than you could get in the boring old stock market. Your returns would be less volatile, and your money would be safer from market crashes. They could do this because they employed a crack team of the best analysts in the world to do all the hard work of finding and buying a private company or alternative assets on your behalf, and extracting as much money as physically possible out of it. Sounds too good to be true, right? Well, it is. Private equity has pushed its business model too far, and now it has trillions of dollars worth of assets that nobody wants. Which sounds like a good thing for regular people who have been the victim of the layoffs and cost-cutting that private equity has become famous for. Right? Wrong. There are 4 reasons why private equity is failing, and 4 reasons why all of us are going to be the ones paying for it. The first reason is that the returns they promised weren't as great as they actually looked. Schrodinger's cat is a thought experiment whereby you put a cat in a box with a poison vial that has a 50% chance to burst and a 50% chance to do nothing. Unless you open the box to see what happened to the cat, there is an equal chance of it being both alive and dead. Physicists use this to describe quantum mechanics, but private equity managers have used it to raise trillions of dollars using one simple trick. My friend Ben Felix, a professional portfolio manager and no-nonsense finance creator, first brought these problems to my attention in a post on Twitter, or X. You should definitely give him a follow if you aren't already subscribed. The value of the private companies and alternative assets that private equity firms build their portfolios around are hard to determine, even by company insiders with full access to their financial information. An unlisted private company doesn't have its stock price instantaneously updated like public companies do, which makes their shares harder to buy, harder to sell, and harder to assign a value to. In the past, investors expected a premium on their returns for compensation for this illiquidity. If you are a rich investor that suddenly needs money to cover an unexpected expense, shares in a public company or listed bonds are much easier to sell than almost any other asset. Liquidating a large number of shares in a private company or selling alternative assets like art, real estate, or patents takes at least a week to find a buyer, draft paperwork, and settle on a deal. And that's the absolute minimum. All of these assets also need someone like a realtor, auction house, or investment banking team to handle the sale, and they are all going to take a cut of their proceeds, which could eat into your returns. For this reason, more liquid assets that are easier and faster to sell at a well-known fair market price are just better. And the only reason why you would invest in less liquid assets is because they could offer higher returns for less risk. Private equity firms have changed this, though, by taking advantage of their assets' biggest weakness and using it as a marketing tool. If they never sell the assets they hold and they never release financial statements, nobody has any idea how much their portfolio is worth. So they can just say a higher number every year, and as long as it doesn't get too ridiculous, nobody can call them out. NCAP, a large private equity firm, found itself in a controversy for exactly this, specifically with its investment in Southland Royalty, an oil and gas company. They formed Southland with over a $1.1 billion investment, contributing 80% of the capital, or $880 million, with other investors making up the rest. With their newly formed company, they acquired oil and gas fields around the U.S., including in the San Juan Basin in New Mexico and the Green River Basin in Wyoming, as well as purchasing 313,000 acres from another oil company. When NCAP set up Southland in 2015, it was hoping for a recovery in oil prices from a drop the year before. In June 2014, it was almost at $100 a barrel, but by the same time in 2015, it hit $55 a barrel. The problem is that oil prices didn't reach those prices again, and their new oil fields didn't produce nearly as much as they wanted. Fast forward to September of 2019, and they still valued Southland close to the same amount as their original investment, but 2 months later, they marked it down to $0 and filed for bankruptcy. When private equity firms represent the fair value of their companies accurately on their books, it's called marking to market. And since they need to compete with other private equity firms to raise money from investors for their next fund, they're not always going to be honest about their underperformers if they don't have to. Private equity managers could reinforce this idea by only selling their highest performing assets, furthering the illusion that everything in the portfolio was doing equally well. The very fact that these assets don't have instantly updated price information actually made them even more attractive with certain fund managers, because it lets them claim to their own investors that their money was growing steadily even during turbulent markets. For a while, this was true. After all, something is worth whatever a buyer will pay for it. But now, the investing public has realized that private equity firms are holding onto a lot of garbage that is going to be very hard to sell. All investment carries risk, and if this were just a story about financial managers delivering bad returns to rich investors after making big promises, it wouldn't need its own video. But a lot of private equity money is your money. And if this convenient lie unravels, it's not going to be the private equity partners losing their jobs. So it's time to learn how money works to find out how private equity failed to live up to its promises and how we are all going to pay the price of that lie. This week's lesson was sponsored by Manscaped. It's time to...
No, just skip a little bit. I'm going to keep going. Just a little bit past the ad. Okay.
Private equity used to be an elite investing strategy only open to ultra-wealthy, sophisticated investors, and back then, it did deliver returns above the market. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway can attribute a lot of its early success to operating like a private equity firm with famous investments like the Nebraska Furniture Mart and Heinz being private equity acquisitions. Investors saw the potential of private equity, and now it's gone mainstream. According to data from Morgan Stanley and published by the Financial Times, the assets under management in private equity have grown by 1,400% since the year 2000. Private equity strategies like growth equity have grown even faster. There is now 10,000% more capital in this space than there was just 24 years ago. And that alone is the second reason why the golden age of private equity is over. Charts that look like this in finance are notoriously always very sustainable, safe long-term plays that never end up collapsing aggressively. For legal reasons, that was sarcasm before you load up on Blackstone call options. Obviously, this can't go on forever, and already private equity's biggest threat has become private equity itself. If you are the only person in town buying real estate and there are a lot of renters looking for a place to live, you can pay whatever you want for a house because sellers have nobody to sell to but you. And you can charge whatever you want in rent because renters have nobody to rent from but you. Your returns from this kind of market should be extremely strong. For a long time, this is how private equity made their money. There weren't many firms buying private companies, so anybody that wanted to sell their business had to basically accept what these new firms were willing to pay. As more firms moved into the space and raised more money, though, there was more competition to purchase these businesses. If you are a private equity manager and you can buy a business generating an EBITDA of $500,000 a year for $1.5 million using all debt, you will pay down the loan in a little over 3 years, and then you can sell the company for the same price, profiting $1.5 million. If you get into a bidding war with another private equity firm, though, and the acquisition price becomes $5 million, then you are no longer even beating regular market returns. Now, this simply won't do, because if you can't beat the market, your investors will withdraw their money and you will miss out on your multi-million-dollar bonuses. So, you need a way to keep people invested, which is the third reason why private equity is struggling. Private equity managers get most of their money from delivering investment returns in excess of broad market performance. But data from Cambridge Associates, Capital IQ, and Bloomberg shows that the competition for buying companies has pushed valuations up. And using EBITDA over EV, a measure to determine returns, the average private equity fund underperforms the S&P 500 before fees. This was also shared by Ben, whose literal job it is to pick good investments for his clients. To try and maintain their relevance, private equity managers have resorted to leveraging up their business as much as possible, and cutting expenses wherever they can to increase their earnings. The most popular way to do this is with layoffs. A report by the Private Equity Stakeholder Project found average job losses of 4.4% in the 2 years after an acquisition by a private equity company. That doesn't sound too bad until you remember that most companies add employees over time, and this study was conducted during a period when unemployment as a whole fell by 4.5% nationwide. Cost-cutting has also resulted in businesses offering worse quality service to their customers. This is bad when they buy your favorite fast food franchise and cut the quality of ingredients in your Whopper. But private equity companies have even cut costs in businesses like nursing homes, preschools, hospitals, and prisons. According to studies from the National Bureau of Economic Research, as well as reports from The Atlantic, The New York Times, and Bloomberg, the endless push to lower expenses and maintain margins has been responsible for tens of thousands of premature deaths in some of the country's most vulnerable people. Private equity managers may be willing to do this to maintain their margins and keep their carried interest. But now, the whole industry has become so large that it's attracting the attention of regulators who are cracking down hard on these investors. At the end of last year, the Senate Budget Committee announced a bipartisan investigation into private equity ownership of hospitals, and simultaneously, the White House announced a crackdown on anti-competitive practices in the space. Congress is also pushing for a new bill that would limit tax breaks for corporate investors buying single-family homes. Currently, they can claim interest and depreciation as tax write-offs, which is making family homes one of the most attractive asset classes for investment funds that have grown too large to acquire more private businesses. 20 years ago, private equity was a niche investment strategy that nobody heard of, but its rapid growth and high returns got the attention of big investors who ruined a good thing by taking it too far. Now it's got the attention of young people who can't afford a home, elderly people who can't afford care, and politicians who can't afford to not look like they are doing something to fix this problem. I am writing an article on the best and worst firms and investors in the private equity arena over on my completely...
You can pause that. Now, I'm trying to find my video because there was one I was listening to which talked about PetSmart, and that PetSmart was acquired by a private equity firm, and then the dogs, because they have a vet there, died at 2 times the rate. And I'm like, and if that's not enough to save the dogs, what else can get you into, understanding that we need to do something about this?
Let me read a couple of comments. Chris says, even their examples are evil. Who thinks of putting a vial of poison with a cat in a box? Psychopaths who don't care about destroying people's hard work, who are cat abusers too. Seven Ange says, Morganreport.monkey is about an experiment where they taught monkeys to use money and how they had to stop it as the monkeys started hoarding money and how it corrupted the monkeys. Apparently, when the scientists tried to take the money away from the monkeys, the scientists got beaten up by the monkeys and they did not want to give the money back. Chris says, unbelievable depths of depravity have been passed over for years as scientific advancement. Beagles and all of God's creation should be treated with compassion. Patriot Gallery says, BlackRock doesn't own anything because the money is all counterfeited. So the money does... So money comes from thin air. BlackRock did not use gold and silver coins, and the companies in the first place were constitutionally illegal since 1913. But she also made a comment earlier that was so funny. I wanted to, where did it go? It was, Mom, where did your comment go? I laughed out loud at it about gold and silver. Hang on, I'm going to find it. Don't go anywhere. There it is. She says, Ralphie Farber was on our show a couple of weeks ago. G. Edward Griffin will be on Monday night, March 24th. That's the day after Patriot Gallery's birthday. Gold is real, she says. You can pick it up and hold it in your hands and throw it at people. She says everything else is derivative of gold and silver.
I love that.
That was really good, Mom.
All right. Can you go to my history, Michelle? Because I've got to, I think I didn't bring up the next one I wanted you to play. No, you can. That's Mom. That's really funny. It is really funny.
Oh, it hurt.
Let's play investigating the private equity's killer company strategy. It's going to be my history.
Oh, okay.
If it didn't come up.
How far back in their history?
Let's see. We'll make it number 1.
No, it's fine.
I'll do that. We can just open that one first.
This one?
And then the next. So those two.
Have you ever wondered why so many major retail chains have filed for bankruptcy or closed locations recently? I mean, we're talking Toys R Us, Baskin Robbins, J. Crew, Hertz, 24 Hour Fitness, even Dunkin' Donuts. It's pretty much an entire mall. Well, it's not just because of the pandemic. See, there's a shadowy mafia that has been ripping off the entire U.S. economy while making themselves rich. Filthy rich. This group is responsible for bankrupting hospitals, your favorite retail chains, and even ripping off Taylor Swift. They're called private equity, and your company might be next. Let's take a deep dive into the private equity mafia. I'm Adam Conover, and this is The Classroom from More Perfect Union. So, what does private equity mean? Well, if you want to be literal about it, it's just investing in any asset other than the public stock market. A private equity firm like Blackstone, KKR, Carlyle, or Apollo manages a private equity fund, which is a big pool of money from investors. Maraschino cherries, the works. Then, when the owners can't pay them anymore, they just burn the joint down for the insurance money. Now, in the mafia world, this is called a bust out, and it's obviously criminal. But in private equity, it's called a leveraged buyout.
Leveraged buyout.
Leveraged buyout.
Leveraged buyout.
The classic LBO.
And it's completely legal. You can't just give a crime a businessy name and call it legal. I can't legally commit murder if I call it a lifespan termination agreement. No, sir, I'm not stabbing you. If this is just a knife-to-chest merger.
JP Morgan's too, of course, and killers too, but that was a business, right? The American way.
Leverage in a business context just means borrowed money, debt used to buy an asset. So in a leveraged buyout, a private equity firm is buying a company using a giant loan, much like how you might take out a mortgage or student loan. But unlike those loans where you, the buyer, are responsible for paying it and all the interest back, in a leveraged buyout, the company being purchased is responsible for the loan, not the private equity firm. These companies get saddled with up to 90% of their value in debt, while the private equity firm stands to lose nothing but the 10% they put in. Now, private equity firms like to claim that they're coming in and saving small businesses.
We really wake up every day trying to build businesses. That is the goal of private equity.
But in reality, they're mostly targeting businesses that are already doing fine. And this isn't some fringe strategy. It's happening all the time. In just 2021 alone, there were around 8,500 leveraged buyouts in the United States, valued at $1.2 trillion. Now, you might ask, pumping thousands of companies full of debt, how is this a money-making strategy? Well, to private equity billionaires, the companies they buy are just theoretical assets, numbers in a ledger, potential profit sources. But, in reality, they're real organizations with thousands of employees, the people who actually do the work and are relying on that income. Private equity controls a ridiculous amount of the workforce now, and it is growing from fewer than 9 million workers in 2018 to almost 12 million in 2020. So, let's look at how leveraged buyouts affect the workers at the companies acquired by a private equity firm. Their new bosses, the PE firm, are concerned with paying off the debt and increasing profits and little else. So, what do? Well, first, layoffs. When private equity takes over a large company, 13% of jobs on average are cut. From 2009 to 2019, private equity killed 1.3 million retail jobs, and that's just one industry. And they can also just make your job worse even if they don't lay you off. Employees at private equity-owned companies pay more out of pocket for health insurance, get less employer retirement contribution, and get fewer raises, all in the name of cutting costs to pay back debt. Now, More Perfect Union covered this, showing what happened to working conditions at the Cheesecake Factory when it was snapped up by Rourke Capital, a firm, this is true, named after a character in an Ayn Rand novel. Interesting fact, Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead, where the name Rourke comes from, is 753 pages long, and that is 80 pages shorter than a Cheesecake Factory menu. And even with all these cuts to the basic rights of workers, private equity still manages to run companies into the ground. About 20% of public companies taken private by private equity go bankrupt in their first 10 years, compared to just 2% otherwise. Like in the case of a company that was very dear to me and any kid who grew up in the 90s, Toys R Us. The company was bought in 2005 by a coalition of private equity and real estate firms, and the toy chain was immediately burdened with over $3 billion in debt. By 2007, just 2 years of private equity ownership, Toys R Us was spending 97% of their profits on paying back interest, and not even the full loan. That prevented them from being able to innovate. You know, that thing that capitalists are supposed to love doing. So, Toys R Us missed out on that whole internet thing. You know, kind of a big deal. But was that managerial failure, or because they couldn't afford to do it, thanks to all those burdensome loans? And you know what? It's not just Toys R Us. 2/3 of companies that filed for bankruptcy in 2016 and 2017 were private equity owned. If a company you worked for went bankrupt, well, there's a good chance it was private equity's fault. Okay, so let's recap where we've been so far. Private equity is destroying jobs and making workers' lives worse. But cost cutting also affects consumers in some pretty serious ways. Private equity investments in nursing homes went up $95 billion from 2000 to 2018, and now 10% of all U.S. nursing homes are owned by private equity. These firms cut staffing and nurse hours so the residents get less basic and emergency care. Residents in private equity-owned nursing homes are 50% more likely to be on antipsychotic medication and 10% more likely to die. One study found that private equity ownership of nursing homes is responsible for 1,000 deaths a year. Private equity investments in general health care more than tripled since 2015. Now 25% of hospitals are owned by private equity. The Journal of the American Medical Association found that private equity-owned hospitals had a $407 increase in charges per inpatient day. And yeah, that's a cost that's being passed on to the patients like you and me. And if human suffering isn't enough to get you mad, well, how about this? After BC Partners acquired PetSmart in 2015, dog deaths at PetSmart groomings doubled. Yeah. Dead puppies don't do it for you? Well, how about hugely popular singer-songwriters? In 2020, the private equity firm Shamrock Holdings bought the rights to all of Taylor Swift's master recording, album art, and music videos, leaving Swift. Well, let's listen to Jeffrey Hook, a finance professor at the Johns Hopkins Carey School of Business, who worked for the finance industry for decades.
The marketing pitch is that these private equity investors are geniuses and are beating the public markets by leaps and bounds. When you dig a little deeper, when you lift up the rocks, you find out that these kinds of claims are untrue. They're flat with the public markets, or in some cases underperform.
Huh. So if the money isn't going back to the investors, where is it going? Perhaps it has something to do with why some call this industry the billionaire factory. In 2005, there were just 3 private equity multi-billionaires, but by 2020, there were 22 of them, and they are now worth a combined $153 billion.
Billion, that's
money
1,000
that was directly
million.
transferred from the retirement savings of teachers and nurses. So, let's talk about how private equity is not only destroying businesses, but is transferring wealth from the retirements of the people who need it to a small group of private equity executives via exorbitant fees.
The amount of money put into private equity is gigantic, probably a couple of $1 trillion easy. And estimates vary, but I would say probably a little more than half would be in public plans or municipal plans.
Hook says that private equity firms aren't providing the returns they promise. And Hook isn't alone. Oxford researcher Ludovic Philippou found that once you factor in the massive fees private equity funds charge their investors, the funds perform no better than simply investing in the stock market. Research by the American Federation of Teachers, run by President Randy Weingarten, found that the average private equity fund used to perform similar to the public stock market, but since the mid-2000s has actually underperformed the public market. Even Warren Buffett, the ultimate Wall Street insider himself, agrees.
We have seen a number of proposals from
retirees. The firms also make money with monitoring fees.
The fee that's kind of hidden is called a monitoring fee, and that is the fee for giving them advice and sitting on the board of directors.
That's right.
Well,
they buy the company, forcibly hire themselves as consultants and directors, and then pay themselves for it. It's all part of their win-win for themselves system, and they collect a little bit of money every step of the way. Now, the winners here are obvious, like a mob-run casino, or any casino, the house always wins.
All that money is rolling in.
What's a terrific deal with the private equity managers? They put up very little money, they get a huge amount of fixed fees. In the process, we've created a new plutocracy.
So, how do teachers feel about the fact that billions of dollars of their retirement savings are being used to fund? Again, like the mafia, they've got guys on the inside everywhere.
Over the years, the industry has developed, with the help of many enablers, what I call a protective ecosystem. The private equity industry is essentially operating unfettered by federal government regulation. I mean, you have thousands of private equity funds. You might have a couple of dozen people out of thousands of SEC employees that cover the private equity industry. The SEC's offered no explanation for why it lets
You can
this
pause
gigantic
it. You know what
industry-
the, you can stop that one. You know what the explanation is. It's because they are making the money off of this.
Right.
And they're making the regulations for that. One more, I think, on the killer company strategy, I think here. I don't know if you've got that one up. It might have to be in my history. And I think my history.
Okay.
And then we're going to talk about a few other things. We're going to talk about the housing, how they're doing this in housing still, and some other ways that these private equity firms are.
You guys are killing me in the comments here. Read their comment. I'll read the comments. You pulled the video.
Okay.
Baker Mom says, throw some gold at me, please. And 7 Ann says, here, throw some gold my way too, please. Chris says, things are getting real when nuggets start flying. Where Sherry wants to know where the video was from, the name of that guy, the one that we just played.
Okay.
7 Ann says, I wonder if Amazon is one of the companies behind this scheme. Patriot Gallery says, just don't throw fiat at me. I don't need any debt. All fiat is debt in a debt
That
instrument.
one is, I'll put it in the chat, how private equity plundered the American economy from More Perfect Union.
Ballistic Mystic over on YouTube, and we're back on YouTube tonight. We've been gone. If you missed us for a week and you were commenting on YouTube and you're like, where are you guys at? Because I saw a couple of those comments. Guys, we've been telling you, if you don't see us on YouTube, then we have been given a spanking by YouTube, and that's what happened. So they put us in timeout for a week there. Says the loan steading of people as property. Well said. All right, what am I playing next?
The one I just brought up to the side.
Okay, this one.
Yeah.
In a toy store walk into a bar. They all ordered the same drink.
There's a link to that video.
Then two go bankrupt and the other doubles its business. So what's this drink? And did it cause these outcomes? Since the 80s, a little-known private equity strategy called asset stripping has drawn quite the controversy. It supposedly gutted workforces, killed iconic companies, and is allegedly on track to ruin the world. But is that true? This is my investigation into this potent private equity strategy. Is this a poison or a medicine with a lethal dose? The reality is far more nuanced than you might like. Fundamentally, asset stripping is pretty simple. It's when
a private equity firm buys up a business and then they try to take away the assets of the business, sell it off for literal parts with the hope that the component parts make more money than an actual business would.
So understood this way, asset stripping is like buying an old jalopy for $100, taking off the wheels, selling those for $50, melting down the metal frame, selling that for $75, and leaving with $25 more than you paid and no car.
I'd first like to say that asset stripping is a pejorative term.
Uh-oh, some discord here. Let me introduce my experts. This is Brendan Ballou. He wrote a book calling out private equity and is not the biggest fan. And this is Gustavo Schwed. He used to work in private equity and is more of a fan. Between both of them, we can get a pretty good look at the pros and cons of the massive private equity industry. But let's start with our terms. As Gustavo said, asset stripping is a negative word. It's like thief.
It isn't.
There aren't First, instead of using their own money, private equity firms generally use other people's money. Went through some version of this process to buy Red Lobster. With a bunch of debt to pay off, Red Lobster immediately sells almost all of its land to a real estate company for $1.5 billion. That helps with the debt, but Red Lobster isn't Bluetooth, it needs a physical connection. So through this sale leaseback, Red Lobster leases its land back from the company it just sold it to, essentially as tenants in an apartment they used to own.
And that deal meant that Red Lobster now had to pay rent in a deal that would increase 2% each year.
So Red Lobster goes on with life, now paying rent. Basically nothing happened to its sales over the next few years, and slowly ownership transfers. In 2016, Golden Gate sold 25% of Red Lobster to a fish company called Thai Union for $575 million. Then in 2020, Thai Union bought 24% more, becoming the biggest shareholder. Golden Gate then sold the remainder of the company to a group of investors, including Thai Union, for an undisclosed sum. In 2023, Red Lobster posts a $76 million loss, and then Red Lobster files for bankruptcy. So what killed it?
It's tough to say, because when a company fails, everybody has an incentive to tell their side of the story.
What makes it even harder is the fact that many privately held businesses don't share their financials at all with the public. So, for example, I don't have access to Red Lobster's annual reports, but some things about the company have come out in its bankruptcy proceedings. The first explanation was endless shrimp.
Endless shrimp.
Endless shrimp?
Because that's iconic. Then people said it was Thai Union's bad leadership. One whistleblower article reported Thai Union led to a revolving door of CEOs, harassment from leadership, and a feng shui expert telling them their headquarters had bad energy.
Are you sure this is better?
Absolutely. But ultimately, the company's bankruptcy claim revealed that it was kind of all of those things, plus Golden Gate's impact. First, selling endless shrimp for $20 all year round cost the company $11 million. Plus, Thai Union, Red Lobster's shrimp supplying owner, is being investigated for potentially forcing Red Lobster to stop buying shrimp from anyone but them, which led to shrimp shortages and higher costs. Then the Red Lobster CEO blamed inflation and the rising cost of labor and fewer people eating out. And lastly, the company's move to sell off its land was coming back to haunt it. Rent across 687 locations cost the company $190 million in 2023. And many of these locations were underperforming and paying above market rates. So, was asset stripping really the culprit that led to Red Lobster's bankruptcy? Dubious. Let's get to the next scenario, which makes private equity's impact a bit clearer. Burger King is an interesting company because it was bought by private equity twice, but the outcomes from each time were quite different. The first time was in 2002, when a trio of private equity firms came together to buy Burger King for $1.5 billion.
This is
of that purchase price, they only paid $210 million of their own money. The rest was debt. Or at least that's what several reports say the details were. Though again, because these aren't publicly circulated financials, the true numbers are a bit unclear. But if they are true, that means 86% of the price was funded by debt, which is exceptionally high, even for leveraged buyouts, which tend to be between 60 and 80%. But the private equity firms didn't do all that much to pay that debt off. Instead, they stripped one of Burger King's most valuable assets, its cash. Once the trio had control, they extracted some hefty fees and dividends from Burger King. But under the trio's ownership, Burger King's business barely changed. Over 8 years, the chain only added 750 restaurants, a growth rate around 1% per year. Although the private equity firms did cash out around $500 million in dividends and fees for themselves. But in 2010, 3G Capital, another private equity firm, came in with a different tactic. They buy Burger King for $4.3 billion, this time with about $2.7 billion in debt, or roughly 63% of the purchase price. It's a much lower proportion of debt than the previous private equity trio. Then immediately, 3G starts cutting costs. They cut $107 million in administrative expenses, and the overall headcount shrinks 60% at their headquarters. They also sell off virtually all corporate-owned restaurants, relying heavily on franchises instead. And of course, they pay themselves. In 2011, Burger King gets $400 million of debt, and 3G takes $393 million of it as a dividend. And in 2012, Burger King goes public yet again, though 3G retains 71% of the company. And since then, 3G has largely held on as Burger King bought Tim Hortons in 2014 and eventually created a parent company that now owns both of them. So they stripped assets, cut costs, and paid themselves. But these three charts show an interesting outcome. First, since 3G's acquisition, the number of Burger King locations has roughly doubled, reaching almost 20,000 worldwide in 2022. That means more people employed and wider brand reach. Second, Burger King's system-wide sales have generally sloped upwards, adding about $10 billion since 2015. And third, while Burger King's corporate revenue has gone down through the loss of corporate-owned restaurants, its revenue from franchising fees has stayed around $1 billion. Is asset stripping good? Well, this example certainly makes it seem better. The final example shows the worst fears people have with asset stripping. In 2004, Toys R Us was gliding right along. It made $252 million in net profit from $11 billion in revenue. It had $2.2 billion in long-term debt, but its revenue and cash on hand could easily pay that off. Then in 2005, private equity firms Bain and KKR plus Vornado Realty Trust bought Toys R Us through a leveraged buyout. They spent $6.6 billion for the company, of which just 20% was in cash. So that meant Toys R Us now had to pay nearly $6 billion in debt. But for a while, things seemed fine. Toys R Us boosted its revenue up to nearly $14 billion in 2007 and recorded profits almost every year between the acquisition and 2013. And in 2013, the company hired 45,000 employees in the lead up to Christmas, and its Times Square location was open 24/7. But as time wore on, paying $400 million on debt interest annually became more challenging. And as people started buying more toys online from places like Amazon, the company's revenue began to fall. At the start of 2017, Jeffrey the Giraffe, who called me on my birthday once, still had almost $5 billion of debt. As a result, the company was diverting funds from operations to pay off debt. It cut back on cleaning its stores and whittled down its labor force, while managers apparently gamed customer surveys to avoid punishment for low performance. This left the company with grimy and dusty stores, while executives were somewhat oblivious to how bad it was getting. In August of 2017, the company tried to sell off its land in a sale-leaseback, but the deal ended up falling through. It's hard to know exactly how much the private equity owners made or lost throughout this transaction, but going back to the roots of how private equity buys companies, the responsibility is barely theirs.
It's a heads I win, tails you lose sort of situation. If the business succeeds, that's great for the private equity firm, which has put up very little of its own money. But if things go poorly, it's the company that's bought that's actually responsible for paying off the debt, and the private equity firm can more or less walk away from it.
Fundamentally, asset stripping and leveraged buyouts are...
So that gives you kind of the idea of these guys behind there. Now, I want to play this one. It might be in my, I think I have it up there. This is the ruthless takeover of private equity actually buying, and I've seen this before, trailer parks and then raising people's rent.
I worked my whole life, and this is what it comes down to? Some greedy person wanting his big chunk out of what little bit I had.
How much longer can you afford to live in your home?
1 month. I don't know what I'm gonna do. Hope that I don't wake up tomorrow. Death crossed my mind.
One of the most important forms of affordable housing is under threat. They're called manufactured housing communities. You might know them as mobile home parks or trailer parks, and they often get a bad rap. But 22 million Americans call them home for a reason.
We're pretty much the last oasis of affordable housing in this country.
These parks are at the foundation of America's housing market, often the last line of defense against homelessness. But over the last decade, these communities have become the target of a new kind of landlord. private equity.
Private equity firms are increasingly getting involved.
Some of the biggest investors in America have moved into this industry.
People living in a local mobile home park outraged over the sharp increase in lot rent.
Rents were raised by nearly 60%.
Their rent could increase by thousands of dollars a year.
A group of mobile home residents are protesting their living conditions.
It's like you genetically bred a superior predator and let them loose in a target-rich environment. This is actually a good day. Sometimes it's like mud.
This corporation is putting profits ahead of the safety and welfare of our local citizens, and this we will not allow.
So why have manufactured homes become private equity's latest target? And what can be done to save one of the last forms of affordable housing in the country?
I've lived in manufactured homes for 50 years, maybe more.
Madeline Beckett lives in a park outside of Lansing, Michigan.
This park was run the way a good park should be run, by the same couple for years and years and years. They were a little stern, or she was a little stern. She was a lot stern, but nobody pulled any punches with her.
Like most people in manufactured housing, Madeline owns her home, but pays monthly rent to the park owner for the land it sits on.
When I retired, I looked at my money and my situation, and I'm like, okay, great. I knew what the rent was. It was a third of my income. I don't live high on the hog, I'm not going to Paris anytime soon. And then the conglomerate came in and offered, apparently, the owner money that he couldn't resist. I looked it up and I went, oh dear, I think we are in trouble.
3 years ago, a private equity firm bought Madeline's community and later sold to another firm. Since then, her monthly rent plus fees have jumped 50%.
Instead of what I thought the rent was going to be, it's $200 more. I have nowhere to go. Just the other day, my daughter went with me to the food bank, and I hadn't done that before. I haven't been poor. I worked for 45 years. There is no American dream anymore. All it is survival.
During the pandemic, institutional investors started to buy more manufactured housing than ever before. Between 2020 and 2021, they made nearly a quarter of all manufactured home purchases in the U.S. Today, 12 private equity firms own at least 1,200 parks nationwide, according to the Private Equity Stakeholder Project. In Michigan, private equity owns 1 in every 10 parks.
There is an overall trend in our economy to identify who has the fewest choices and then squeeze them.
Wow. Paul Terranova organizes manufactured housing residents in Michigan.
While folks often call them mobile homes, they're not really particularly mobile. Wall Street investors, private equity firms, hedge funds kind of figured out that folks living in manufactured housing communities are trapped. They can't move.
It costs $10,000 to $20,000 to move one of these homes, and most people who live in them can't afford that.
If you think about the fact that the average manufactured housing resident lives on about $35,000 a year, that's generally out of people's range.
Because they can't move, they're uniquely vulnerable to predatory landlords who can charge the highest rent residents can bear.
There's a guy named Frank Rolfe who runs something called Manufactured Housing University.
Okay, we're now at her second park. We're getting out again. So here we are.
He was quoted saying something along the lines of, owning a mobile home park is like owning a Waffle House and having your customers chained to the booth.
The big thing is they can really tolerate rent increases really well.
Oh my
And it pretty much works throughout America because there's so much need for affordable housing right now.
Pause that.
That business model.
There are people going to school to learn how to take food from poor people. Mm-hmm. Look at all those people there. This is a school to teach you how to invest, then just raise prices on people. They're stuck there. They're literally stuck there. Like if you raise rent in an apartment, people can go to usually another apartment, maybe. Mm-hmm. Even though that's getting very hard right now. But there are the haves and the have-nots. And the mindset of investing right now, this is why I say do gold and silver, because you don't know. You don't know if your pension fund is going and imagine if you were. Imagine if you were making money, and I hear it right in the back of my head. Nothing I can do about it. It just is, Leah. It just is. There's nothing, I can't fix the world's problems, Leah. Why would you ask me? And not anybody watching me, but those people. This is what George Soros said when he
says,
was
if I don't
Jewish,
do it, somebody else
and
is
he was
do
his father convinced a Christian man, Christian as in just an identity, to adopt him and say he was a Christian, not a Jew. And so they were forced to plunder. He was forced to plunder his neighbors' homes and send them to Auschwitz. And he says with a glee and a twinkle in his eye, and he says, if I didn't do it, somebody else would. And then he immediately says, and that's the way I see the stock market and the markets as that. And we have raised children not to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And you take the Bible out of schools, this is what you get. I'm going to go a little, sending your kids to public schools, pastors, stop it. Because I'm telling you something, you are actually propping up the system. When a pastor or a Christian sends their children to public schools, you can say, well, I'm going to raise my child to be better. That's fine. But what you're doing is you're putting a stamp of approval on that schooling for the other kids to go there. And what they're taught is that the world is a dog-eat-dog world. What they are taught is that you have to get on top. What they are taught is that your God is money. That is your God. And I'm going to tell you something. The God of this world is money right now. Money, money, money. And I rebuke it right now. Everybody is waking up every day. Money, money. It's your first thought when you wake up, and it's for not you guys. It's for the rest of the world. It's the first thought that they have when they wake up, and it's the last thought that they think of when they go to sleep. Money, 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 money. They bend over backwards. They do things that they absolutely hate. Not for the money. That's what you have to understand. They are partaking in the system because it's their God. Mm-hmm. Because I guarantee you, almost every church, their God is money first. Leah, I go to a great church. My God, no. God is our provider. God is our El Shaddai. God is our first thought when we wake up. God is our first thought when we go to sleep. God is our thought throughout the day. All these things do the Gentiles seek. Cast your care on him, for he cares for you. Now, I realize this world is hard and we need money. But there is a mindset of this investing. There's a mindset behind this private equity stuff. There's a mindset, and the mindset is a God. Mm-hmm. And the God is money. The love of money, meaning making money your God, is the root of all evil. It's not that I love money. You don't understand. You're loving a God, and it's just going back to the Aztecs or going back to the Incas or going back to the Hittites. Who are they sacrificing to? Who is Marduk? Who is Ishtar? Fertility gods, yes. But these are God a sustenance. That's a word that just came to me. God's a sustenance, meaning you will sustain me. So I will sacrifice my child. That's what we were learning about with St. Patrick. What the Romans would do is they would keep children. They would just let them die.
You mean the Druids?
I think it was the Romans actually that they called exposure.
Okay.
I thought it was the Druids just sacrificed. The sacrificing of children is for sustenance from your gods. That's why we need abortion. Okay. And so I want to play a little bit more of this just because I feel like this is a kind of like giving us a visceral reaction to what these...
You are definitely having a visceral reaction.
Because before, Toys R Us is Toys R Us.
Right.
But coming in and ripping off the poorest of all poor people in the entire country.
Yeah.
You've got to be a special kind of, and I don't want to say evil, because those people don't look evil. They look middle class.
So Candace Keller had made a post today that kind of caught my eye, and I hope that I can quote this correctly. She said that narcissists' nervous system are triggered only when, and they're triggered like with pleasure, only when they cause pain in other people.
Wow.
And she's like, these are soulless people.
So they only get happy when they see other people hurt
and suffer. that's the only time that they are triggered with a good feeling.
With a good feeling.
Yeah.
A reliable stream of payments from captive tenants is a big reason why these parks are so lucrative, providing investors with one of the highest annual returns of any asset in real estate. Higher than offices, commercial, industrial,
wow.
You name it.
No.
Hey, trailer park.
No.
This is a financial play to them. They don't care about us. They just as soon evict us, take our homes, and then rent them out to somebody else for $200 more.
Theo Gantos lives in a park near Flint, Michigan. 3 years ago, it was taken over by Homes of America, an affiliate of the hedge fund Alden Global Capital. Alden Global is best known for buying newspapers across the country and stripping their assets.
Yeah, we had a pool, before the Homes of America. We still pay the same amount as though we had a pool and as though we had a community center, but we have no community center either.
Since 2021, Homes of America has gone on a buying spree, spending nearly $300 million to acquire 138 parks across 17 states. They've raised rents and aggressively evicted residents. After years of neglect, only about 15% of the lots in Theo's park are still occupied.
Oh my God.
And who is Homes of America?
Homes of America is just a shell within a shell within a shell. Homes of America is Randy Smith.
Randall Smith is the founder and chief investment officer of Alden Global. He lives in Palm Beach, Florida. As of 2017, he owns 17 mansions. He has since sold 14 of them for a reported profit of $57 million.
Yeah, this is the plunder of private equity. This is what they do.
Okay, everybody ready? Everybody rolling? All right, good afternoon.
In August, the county prosecutor brought charges against Homes of America's local LLC for operating the park without a license. It's the first time that the owner of a manufactured housing park in Michigan has ever faced that criminal charge.
A key element in the North Morris Estate's inability to obtain a license is its seeming refusal to fix the park's water problem.
Well, when the water comes out like this, it kind of ruins your whole day.
Yeah. Hopefully, we'll get the attention of the out-of-state corporation that owns this park and force its officers and directors to do the right thing for the residents of this community. It's clear to me this corporation is putting profits before people.
You can pause that one.
Obviously,
they're putting profits before people. I wanted to switch gears. I want to talk about well, actually, we're gonna go back in time to 2008, and I want to play. It's a 3-minute video to remember what happened. I thought I had it up. What happened did I shut it down? Remembering. Oh, it's a Twitter. I think it is.
7Ange wants this video, so let me grab this link. She said she has a sister that lives in a trailer park. There you go. There's that link. I'll go ahead and put it over on YouTube. Dawn says, this is sad.
It was really sad. Okay, you have to go to my history. I want you guys to remember, now we're going to go kind of talk about the housing market that is right now, because if there's retail, then there's also the housing market that you don't even see that's crazy. And so I want you to remember what happened in 2008. This is the crash. This is a stock market crash. This is the day, I think.
Apple's up more than 6% right now. Google about 3%, but Dell, Intel, Research Motion, and Microsoft are all to the upside. Look how strong.
Did not disappoint. 400 points higher. Yes, indeed. The market's more higher. Last 30 minutes of trading as volatility once again rules the day.
Most of the techs this morning, if not all of them, have just exploded to the.
Now this is September 29th, 2008.
Down 1.7% here, a loss of 37 points or so. Apple shares are just getting hammered this morning.
We're down by between 3 and 4.5% generally across these markets. Let's talk about the speed with which we are watching this market deteriorate. We're red everywhere, essentially, down by 4-5%.
We're down over 16%. Dow at the same time has fallen about 18%.
The stock market is now down 21%.
Because we're now down 43%.
What in the world is happening on Wall Street?
2-year no yields went from 190 to 166 in the blink of an eye.
On the NASDAQ, everything and more has been completely wiped out.
It was the worst day on Wall Street since the crash of 1987.
From the financial capital of the world, the opening bell is going to ring
in 5 seconds, and to be honest with you, we wish it wouldn't.
Traders here working the phone say a lot of their customers are freaked out, waiting to see how low the Dow will go. They're focused on the Dow, not so focused on OPEC. Yes, OPEC did cut production by 1.5 million barrels per day.
Really, you're seeing just broad-based declines across all of the major technology sectors. Apple's under pressure, Yahoo down 8.5%, Cisco 6.5%, Research in Motion 10%.
And we're not getting the bid wanted. We're not getting the stop trading, and we see where the buyers are. We're just, every day they're pounding it.
The heightened financial turmoil that we have experienced of late may well lengthen the period of weak economic performance and further increase the risk to growth.
Can't look at it after you buy it. It's so horrible.
We've had an 8-day losing streak in the Dow that in percentage terms puts it on par, close to the loss suffered in that crash in 1987, close to that percentage loss those 2 days in 1929.
What started in America last year has now spread to every part of the world.
We're down 9% today. The Xetra DAX over in Frankfurt is down by 9%. The Paris market down by 9%. Austria, which was briefly suspended earlier on in the day, is down by nearly 11%.
This market is as volatile as you'll ever see.
Traders saying this is the craziest day they have ever seen in these markets. Veteran traders saying they've never seen anything like it. The movement in oil prices so fast, so fast.
Seconds to go until the start of trading at the New York Stock Exchange, and stocks are set to kick off lower, a whole lot lower.
eBay is down 6.5%, and really.
So I heard the Lord say just now when that video was playing that, because I was kind of questioning, I'm like, Lord, how is it that these people that deal with money every single day could be so oblivious to the dangers, to the house of cards? Like, you're playing Jenga, right?
I can see it, you can see it, but ain't nobody talking about it.
But they can't see it. And the word that the Lord spoke to me is he said they have tunnel vision.
Wow.
They're so busy trying to get their Jenga thing higher and higher and higher. They don't care about what they're pulling out from underneath and the holes that are being created underneath. They just keep thinking that they can keep pulling and pulling and pulling, and that the tower will never fall because they have that greed and that hunger of that tunnel vision. So when you see these, you know, when I was looking for graphics for today's show, and I just put in stock market crash of 2008. And I didn't end up using any of these pictures, but like there were a ton of pictures of people at the, like, you know, the S&P and at the, at the stock exchange, and their heads are in their hands. And they're just like, they can't breathe. Yeah. They're just like, oh my gosh. You and I, we've been talking about it on our show that economic collapse is inevitable. It is going to happen. 2008 is going to happen again. And it's going to be worse than it was in 2008. It is coming. And it's going to bring in a lot of, I don't want to say, like, I don't want to curse anything and like predictively curse, but it's not a curse. It's just a fact. When it happens, depression is going to set in. Because you just talked about how people's God is money. And when they don't have it and they don't have any security in that, do you know how hollow lives are right now? Like, people don't have relationships anymore. Everything is so spread out. People don't communicate with their families. And so a lot of times
they look at, it's called their perspectives.
Okay.
And they open them up
and they look every day, and it makes them, it's like they're Donald Duck, what was Duckworth, and he counts his money every single day, and that makes them feel happy. That gives them their high, their endorphins. It makes them feel a twisted perversion of love, right? Because they love their money, they love their bank accounts, they love watching their money go up and up and up, and their pensions go up and up and up. And when that falls, you're going to see depression like you've never seen in your lifetime. Okay.
It's very interesting. I remember somebody said, Leah, Michelle, don't say this. I have, family who are firefighters and nurses, and they have these pensions. Don't say this. Like I have the power in not saying it, like for it to not happen.
I know, because you have to warn people. And that's what tonight's show is about. I call it a special report because this is something that I want you to send this to your friends. I want you to send it to your family members. We have to, I put in a little alarm up in the corner here. We have to sound the alarm, because in 2008, we didn't get that opportunity.
And we so I tell you guys this story, but just real quick, my family was, my grandfather worked for GM. My grandmother had died in that year. And it was kind of crazy how God did all these things. And we know that my grandma this says that righteous are taken before the day of calamity. My grandma would not have survived. She would have had a heart attack.
It was a double whammy that year.
She lived by watching that stock market go up and down.
At the start of the day and at the end of the day, she would watch her stocks and watch her portfolios.
She'd watch it go down at the bottom. And
she would be happy or sad according to
how it would go up and down.
How it would go. And she loved to watch her money and count her money.
And GM went down all the way. Like, you could be like, oh, okay, that stock market kind of went down. She had P&G stock. P&G actually rebounded, right? It went down. It crashed and it rebounded because they still sell Tide. It was very interesting. I don't know exactly why GM and Ford, which they're still making cars, by the way, because we bailed them out. But GM went to zero and we had to sell. And so she had a third of all of her wealth in GM stocks. And we kept telling my uncle, who was the executor, you have to sell, you have to sell. And we watched it. And we watched a third of her wealth go down. She was left with a third, 2/3. He sold at actually, it was almost 3/4 of what she had in the GM stocks. And we were screaming at my uncle. We're yelling, sell now, you idiot, sell now. It was in the summer because the real stock market crashed in September. But
GM kept going down.
We were telling him in June, sell now, sell now, sell now. And we watched it. And I truly know that God gave Michelle, because these are paper dollars. It's almost playing Monopoly. Okay. Money is money. It goes in, it goes out. So God gave us a seat at the Monopoly table. Mm-hmm. And it was almost like, here, Leah and Michelle, this is money that your family should have, or, your mom should have, your uncle should have. And I'm just going to show you what it looks like when you have your money in the stock market, when you have your money in things like GM and Procter & Gamble. Because here's the thing. The only reason why the rest of the stocks stayed okay, and that you're like, well, it's not bad, the stock market just bounced back. The stock market didn't bounce back.
The money transferred.
Number one, Robert Kiyosaki, you know what he said? I got rich in 2008, and let me show you how you can get rich during 2025, which means how can you transfer wealth from other people to you? That's called thievery. That's called stealing. But in reality, there was the transfer. But you know who did the transfer? The United States government made up money, gave money, they bought, I don't know if you guys know this, but the United States government bought GM and bought Ford.
And so again, just like the private equity,
bought companies.
Taking from people's pension funds, the government printed money out of thin air and decided, listen, we can, if we take the money from everybody,
right,
meaning via inflation,
right,
we can give it to GM and to Ford.
Well, no, what you're giving it to is the investors in the entire stock market. Right. We're giving it to people who, if you have money to invest, you are a wealthy person. If you have money in stocks, you're a wealthy person. So what they did is they took, they said everybody has to put a pool into this. Okay, we're gonna put some of it into this here and this here. We're gonna stop the hemorrhaging of the stock market because we're recognizing that actually what we've been saying for years: don't put your money in the stock market because it's actually gambling, and the house was getting ready to win. Okay, whereas they have it inversed. The house is the White House. The house is the United States government. The House is Nancy Pelosi, who is the best stock trader known to mankind. Okay, that's them. The powers that be, they make sure they're okay. They make sure their friends and their family are okay. And then when they need to, they know that if anything goes wrong with all of their financials, they have the power corporately. Because guess what? You say, how are they so powerful, Leah? How do they know all these things? How does Nancy Pelosi work? The Democrats work with Republicans. It's a religion. It's their God. They worship their God. They are all part of a cult. They're all part of a religion. This is a spiritual thing, right? So spiritually, God took a hammer to the stock market and was like, I'm going to destroy you, okay? And they all came together and they sacrificed children and they sacrificed everything. And they're like, we're going to, and God said, and in my opinion, God said, okay, so what you're saying is you don't want the punishment now. It's just going to get bigger. It's just going to get worse. And I'm going to give you some time. Then what happens after that? God begins to show signs, and I have goosebumps, in the heavens. 4 blood moons on the feasts. Then he gives us the signs in the heaven, the eclipse. And then he gives you Donald Trump, who was a sign, by the way. And then we have blood moon on Purim, and then we're going to have blood moon again. I believe, because I know, here's the thing. It's not that I'm predicting something prophetically. I know God and justice and judgment. I know we're due, and I don't think Ron Paul's claims to be a prophet. None of these people who are showing you what's happening behind the curtain, they're literally pulling the curtain back saying, hello, do you know what's happening behind this private equity curtain over here? Some hanky-panky's happening, and I'm pretty sure this marriage is going to fall apart. Yeah. And so that's what I'm coming to. Don't put me up there as some sort of the prophets prophesying something. I know God is going to bring justice and judgment for abortion, all these things. I can see the signs and the times, and just seeing what the volatility in the market. Gold's at 3,000. That is a historic number. That means that your dollar is worth so much less than you could ever imagine. As when gold goes up, this is worth less. That means the more it's going to take of these to buy more things. And then insider knowledge. And I want you guys who have, here's the thing, if you still have a retirement, please call Lynette and put, this is sound. This is not going to crash. There's no crashing. Okay. Sound money, gold and silver. Please do that. I'm just encouraging you to do that. Go to Lynette Zhang and do that.
ResistanceChicks.com/God's money.
However, for those of you who are struggling, even those who have put their money in gold and silver are having to sell it back because they have gone through their money markets. They've gone through their saving. They've gone through their other forms of cash. And at record numbers, people are having to liquidate their gold and silver. This is not the time, if you can help it, to liquidate gold and silver.
And we were told that by someone at ITM Trading just yesterday.
Because gold is going to continue to be, gold is going higher. I wouldn't be surprised to see it in the end of, 3,500. I wouldn't be surprised at all. Gold and silver, but gold is not an investment. It's wealth preservation. So that's what I'm going to say about that.
No, and I emphasize that though. Gold is not an investment. It is, wealth preservation is the best way to put it. It's the easiest way to say it. But at the same time, it's like, okay, you got this dollar.
Yeah.
And I say it on the show, and I'm sorry for sounding like a broken record, but it's worth less today than it was yesterday. Mm-hmm. It will be worth less tomorrow than it was. This never, ever appreciates.
Yeah.
It only depreciates because of all the corruption of things like private equity that we're talking about today. Mm-hmm. And because of the banks or the government's bailing out the banks, mm-hmm. Let's talk about this. We haven't really talked about this too much. Mm-hmm. Thomas Massie was the only Republican not to vote for the latest spending bill. Mm-hmm. Okay. Donald Trump is now trying to primary, or is vowing to primary Thomas Massie, mm-hmm. because he says he's a grandstander. Mm-hmm. Where Thomas Massie literally wears the debt calculator on his lapel, or whatever it's called, on his pocket there. Mm-hmm. And he's the only one that stood up for your hard-earned money, okay? Mm-hmm. Because he's like, I don't want you guys to have a dollar that's worth even less than it could be. Mm-hmm. Let's not have the train crash go at 1,000 miles an hour. So my point is, when it comes to acquiring gold and silver, mm-hmm. this crash is going to happen. If you don't have any money, then actually
you're going to be okay.
You'll be fine. You're not going to hurt as bad as those that have money.
So let me explain what and this is prophetic. So
people that have money are going to hurt.
So this is what I kind of feel. I'm going to say something.
You don't have anything to lose.
When the stock market, if my grandma had not passed away, or if my grandma had already been passed away and nobody had any stocks and everything was fine, in 2008, my life would not have changed. because as the stock market crashed, actually people still went about kind of living. It just savings from the wealthy crashed, and then it had to be built back up and all those things. I believe, and this is more of a prediction instead of a prophetic word. I'm just going to give a prediction, okay? So you don't have to hammer me with, she's trying to be a prophet. My prediction, and I could be wrong, and we've asked G. Edward Gifford to predict things and Lynette to predict things. The reason why I believe God is going to be targeting the rich, and why I think that when you guys are worried that you don't have the money to put in gold and silver, don't worry. What we're saying to you is if you have finances, save them from crashing.
Right.
But if you don't, you'll be fine.
Right. Exactly. That's
okay. So I've got this one. I want the 2025 housing crisis is worse than 2008.
The 2025 housing market isn't just in crisis, it's experiencing the most severe collapse in buyer demand in over 3 decades. What's even more shocking, the real estate industry is desperately trying to hide a massive, historic demographic shift that's making the 2008 crash look like a mere preview of what's coming. Let me tell you a story about what's really happening in the American housing market right now. Just this week, the Wall Street Journal revealed something that sent shockwaves through the real estate industry. Home sales have plummeted to just 4.06 million units, matching the devastating levels we saw during the 2008 financial crisis. This represents a staggering 34% drop from the pandemic peak and 24% decline from the pre-pandemic levels. But what we're about to share with you makes 2008 look almost quaint by comparison. You see, back in 2008, we were dealing with a financial crisis that unfolded in a very specific way. It began with predatory lending practices that put millions of Americans into homes they couldn't afford. Lenders were offering something called ninja loans. No income, no job, no assets required. They were giving out adjustable rate mortgages with teaser rates as low as 1%, knowing these rates would reset to unaffordable levels in just a few years. When those adjustable rates began resettling in 2006 and 2007, we saw the first tremors of the crisis. Homeowners who had been paying $1,200 monthly suddenly saw their payments jump to $2,500 or more. The initial wave of foreclosures began in the subprime market, but as home prices started falling, it triggered a vicious cycle. Even homeowners with good credit found themselves underwater on their mortgages, owing more than their homes were worth. By late 2008, home prices had fallen 10% year over year, according to the National Association of Realtors. By 2009, that decline accelerated to 17.7% as a wave of foreclosures flooded the market with inventory. The crisis peaked when about 3 million homes received foreclosure notices in 2009 alone. The national home ownership rate fell from its peak of 69.2% in 2004 to 65% by 2013. That crisis was devastating, but it followed a predictable pattern that we'd seen before in financial markets: excessive leverage, speculation, and then a crash. We fixed it through a combination of financial regulations like the Dodd-Frank Act, monetary policy with near zero interest rates, and programs like HAMP, Home Affordable Modification Program, that helped millions avoid foreclosure. What we're facing today is something far more fundamental and, frankly, far more concerning. Instead of a financial crisis that we could fix with policy changes, we're seeing a structural transformation in who can afford to participate in the housing market at all. The American dream of home ownership is undergoing a transformation that nobody wants to talk about. Think about this. The median age of home buyers has jumped to 56 years old. That's a full decade older than before the pandemic. An entire generation isn't just being delayed in buying homes. They're being completely priced out of the market. This shift isn't temporary. It represents a fundamental change in who can afford to participate in the housing market. Let's dig deeper into who's actually buying homes in 2025, because these numbers tell a fascinating story about wealth inequality in America. The market has become dominated by married couples, who make up 62% of all purchases. This is significant because it represents a concentration of household wealth. 2 incomes are increasingly necessary to afford a home in today's market. Single women have emerged as a surprisingly strong force, accounting for 20% of buyers, while single men lag behind at 8%. This gender disparity in home ownership reflects broader economic trends in education and income growth. Perhaps most telling is that unmarried couples, often young people trying to pool resources to afford a home, represent just 6% of buyers, a clear sign that even combining incomes isn't enough to overcome today's affordability barriers. Now, here's where things get really interesting. First-time homebuyers now make up just 24% of all purchases, down from 33% before the pandemic and an astounding 44% 40 years ago. This collapse in first-time buyer participation is unprecedented in modern American history. It's not just about higher prices or interest rates. It's about a fundamental shift in who can accumulate enough wealth to enter the housing market at all. The demographic shifts underlying these changes are even more dramatic than the headline numbers suggest. Census Bureau data shows that only 25% of American households now have children, plummeting from nearly 50% in the 60s. The percentage of married couples has plunged from 75% to just 47% of households. These aren't just statistics. They represent a seismic shift in American society and housing needs. But here's where our story becomes a tale of two markets, and it's crucial for understanding where the opportunities lie in 2025. The regional disparities in the housing market have never been more pronounced, and they're creating both winners and losers in ways that few people understand. The regional dynamics of today's housing market tell a fascinating story about how different parts of America are experiencing entirely different realities. Picture this: in the entire Northeast region of the United States, that's states like New York, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Maine, and New Jersey combined, there are just 85,000 homes for sale. Meanwhile, Florida and Texas combined have 261,000 listings, the highest level in 8 years and more than 3 times the Northeast's inventory. What makes this contrast particularly striking is that before the pandemic, these regions had almost identical inventory levels. They moved in lockstep for years with similar seasonal patterns in response to market conditions. But something dramatic happened after early 2022. These markets completely diverged, creating what economists are calling the Great Housing Market Bifurcation. Let's break down why this happened. The Sunbelt states like Florida and Texas experienced a perfect storm of factors. First, they saw massive population inflows during the pandemic as remote workers fled expensive coastal cities. This triggered a building boom. Builders in Texas and Florida ramped up construction to historic levels. At the same time, investors and speculators poured into these markets, driving prices to unsustainable levels.
So I'm going to pause this one here, and I'm actually going to go. This is another one from EcoCon and play.
Is Trump trying to?
Yes, he is.
The housing market isn't just crashing, it's imploding at a rate that will destroy trillions in American wealth within months. What we're witnessing is a perfect storm of economic forces creating the most dangerous housing market in American history, one that makes 2008 look like a minor adjustment. These conclusions are drawn from extensive data analysis that mainstream financial institutions are deliberately downplaying. Why? Because acknowledging the full scope of this crisis would trigger widespread panic in financial markets. What the data shows today is unprecedented, and the implications for homeowners and investors like you are severe. Let's start with the most alarming indicator: the complete evaporation of buyer demand. Mortgage applications have plummeted by 60% from their pandemic peak, double the 30% decline we saw during the worst of the 2008 crisis. The acceleration of this trend is particularly concerning. In just the last quarter, we've seen an additional 12% decline in mortgage applications. It's not a gentle declaration, it's a market in free fall. The fundamental driver behind this demand collapse is an affordability crisis of historic proportions. According to the National Association of Realtors Housing Affordability Index, housing affordability has reached its lowest level in the 40-plus years this metric has been tracked. The average American now needs a household income exceeding $115,000 to qualify for a mortgage on a median-priced home. Let's put that in context. The median household income in America is about $75,000. This means the typical American family falls $40,000 short of what's needed to buy an average home. This affordability gap has created a mathematical impossibility for millions of potential buyers. In the early 70s, the average home cost about 3 times the median annual income. By 2008, at the height of the last housing bubble, that ratio had climbed to 4.7 times. Today, we're at a staggering 6.8 times annual income, a level that can't be sustained in any rational market. For many of you who have built your wealth through home ownership and real estate investment, this has profound implications. The buyer pool for your properties is rapidly shrinking. The next generation of buyers simply can't afford to purchase your homes at current valuations. To truly understand the severity of our current situation, we need historical context. We've analyzed housing data going back to 1890, over 130 years of market cycles. When we adjust home prices for inflation over this period, we discover something alarming. Current housing valuations sit approximately 80% above the long-term historical norm. This isn't just a bubble, it's the most...
I cannot wrap my brain around this. And I still have a few days to see if I can't get our property taxes down. It has to be done by the 31st of March. I have to get comparable prices. 2017, I'm showing them this.
Oh, okay.
That's why I paused it. 2017, the average home there was about $190,000. Okay, expensive, but doable for pretty much everybody. And pretty much every house in my neighborhood across the street was priced about that. Okay.
And you're looking at January of this year, it's almost doubled.
And for the same houses that would go for 190 are now going for 350, 60, 70, like across the street from me. It's mind-boggling to me. I can't wrap my brain around it. I don't know how to understand it. And the only thing I can think of is that when we flooded the market, when we flooded with the trillions and trillions of the dollars and the bailouts and all the different things, some people obviously have doubled their income, and so they can afford these houses. But other people working regular jobs that haven't gone back to school or aren't in technology and aren't in those sectors, they have not doubled their income. I mean, imagine our friend Catherine. She bought a farmhouse, and she was able to afford it, and she's been paying it off. But now she couldn't afford to buy her own house for what they have it valued at.
Right.
She couldn't get it. Her income wouldn't allow her a loan for what the county is valuing her home as.
Right.
So it's absolutely crazy. So that's the housing portion of it. Now I want to finish we're going to round off our show. And the question is, what is happening to our economy? Is the economy actually crashing? And is Trump behind some of this? Let's play. You can play that one. Sure. You can play a little bit of that one.
So for them, the best course would be a slow kind of deflation of the bubble, a restructuring of the economy, a reset, and then job growth. They're mostly going to focus on job growth, not the stock market. The stock market benefits the owners of financial assets more than the average citizen in the U.S. and really, frankly, anywhere. So that's the plan. It's going to take time, and it's not going to be easy. But I think it has to be done because since the great financial crisis, the U.S. manufacturing base, which was already hollowed out, got even further hollowed out, and it's a tale of two cities. It's the very poor get government benefits, and the very rich prosper from the government spending that flows into the stock market. And so this is a reset of a sort, not the great reset.
Let's be clear. Everybody wants to cut Medicaid and wants to cut food stamps. That's to hold up the stopgap because of the wealth distribution that's happened. That the trillions of dollars that go into the economy is the real welfare, and welfare recipients maybe get $20,000 a year, whereas these guys are getting hundreds of thousands of dollars and $1 million a year because of how when you put trillions of dollars in the economy.
If you could look at it with the proper glasses, you would see that the welfare robbers of the system, those getting the welfare of the government.
Yes.
It's not the poor
getting food stamps.
Right. Even though I'm against all that stuff, but like it's literally these big businesses, it's these big companies.
0% interest rate.
It's other nations getting funds, like all of that. Like we are a socialist country and we are the welfare state. But that's kind of the same thing that I always say with public school system. Your kids are on welfare. You don't understand that even in some way we are all on some sort of welfare system because we buy products from these companies that are on the government welfare, right?
That other people were talking about, but a reset to restructure towards America.
On this episode of What the Finance Podcast, I have the pleasure of welcoming on Edward Dow. So Edward is the founder of Finance Technologies and author of Cause Unknown. So Ed, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today.
Anthony, great to be here. Thanks for having me on today.
No problem. Looking forward to your perspective, because I think today we were just talking before, it's sort of the flash crash of Trump saying he doesn't care about markets, but I'm sure we'll get into the intricacies of what's happening and what's going to happen in the future. But I would like to just start very, high level. What are you currently seeing in the economy and markets?
Yeah, sure. So it's important to note a call we made in 2023. We were looking and forecasting a recession beginning around the end of 23, beginning of 24. And we, my partner, Carlos Alegria, is a PhD physicist, and he's also got a PhD in finance. He's worked at a bunch of hedge funds, Winton, and he lived in London for a time. He's in Portugal right now, but he's developed early cycle indicators, traditional fundamental leading indicators that anticipate the U.S. economy. And everything was flashing for a recession for the end of 23 and 24. And we weren't the only economists calling for that or market participants, and it never came to pass. And so we had to ask ourselves, have the fundamentals of economics changed? Is there something new going on? And we kind of, after some time, figured it out. What really happened and floated the U.S. economy compared to the rest of the globe was massive fiscal dominance in the form of deficit spending. We were running the last 2 years 8% deficit to GDP, which is crisis level spending. In the great financial crisis, we were running deficits of 10% at the extreme. So you have to ask yourself, what was the crisis? We've determined the crisis was getting the Biden regime reelected. And their massive spending created what we call a new economic variable, the elephant in the room. And it was mass immigration coupled with government jobs hiring. So the U.S., literally the private sector.
So that's interesting because we were calling for, we could tell that things were headed in that direction. And what you cannot always predict is the reason why 2008 was gap stop was, he said 10% deficit spending. That means the government is spending more to keep the economy going than you're actually bringing in. And so Biden's big lie was the economy's fine. And so they even put out like, your Easter dinner costs less. No, it doesn't. Are you retarded? Right? But they gave you the numbers. Like, look, it's 5 cents less, or something. Your ham's a little less. Like that's since, or maybe it was the 4th of July. Your 4th of July, your hot dogs. I don't know what it was, but it was there. Don't worry, the economy is fine. And they kept telling you, Michelle, things are not expensive. What is wrong with you? Why do you think that they're going? You know what I mean? It's because they had to make believe. And when Trump inherited this economy, he says, we're going to finish up with that. I believe that Trump is taking us into a controlled demolition. You have seen 9/11, and Trump was there in 9/11, and he's going to be in this controlled demolition.
Sector economy was in what we would call recession, but the overall economy was floated along by massive government spending. That leads to the election with Trump. Trump won. And,
the Green New Deal.
If you want to know why he won, forget all the noise you hear.
Pause over time. What was that spending? They passed that $1 trillion Green New Deal. Trillions. Okay, so let me just break it down one more time. There's 1,000 million in a billion, and there's 1,000 billion in a trillion. And they had a Green New Deal. And Stacey Abrams over there, remember we talked about it a little bit, and she's getting some of that cash, and she's lining her pockets to make sure everybody gets gets themselves a refrigerator and stuff like that. She's like, I don't know why I got an extra $24 million. I just got it, because I'm smart.
Here, there's really one reason. It was the economy. We have statistics that show that. So basically, going into the election, real wage growth in the U.S. was -2%. That happened in 1980 election under Ronald Reagan. He had -2%. He won in the landslide. And Bill Clinton in 92 also had -2% real GDP wages, and he won. And his campaign advisor, James Carville, famously said, "It's the economy, stupid." So the average American was feeling that their life had gotten much
even
more
the
difficult under Joe Biden.
Black guys, remember?
And that's primarily why Trump won. And Trump's promises and pledges was to stop illegal immigration, to cut government spending or investigate it, and to redirect the economy from fiscal dominance back into the private sector. So essentially what we're seeing now is the unwinding of an unsustainable Biden policy. It was a sugar high, and it was very unproductive debt that we added. It was government jobs and legal immigrants. And so you're seeing the effects of that. We put out a report at the beginning of this year highlighting that we were wrong in 23-24. We figured out why, and we figured out what's coming this year. And it looks like we're predicting the danger of a deep worldwide recession, and it's going to be led by the housing sector and the unwind of this spend. That's it kind of in a nutshell. And we put out the report on January 9th. And on the 10th, U.S. Treasury bond yields, the 10-year and the 30-year peaked and have been going down ever since. So, was that due to our report? Absolutely not. Our timing was just good. I mean, we're not going to take credit for that. But it seems like this is happening a lot faster than we anticipated. We were expecting our call to be kind of manifesting itself sometime in the June, July timeframe. It looks like it's starting to manifest now, and the numbers are starting to go our way.
Yeah, okay, a lot to unpack there. So how is it possible that I guess there was such a large deficit and people were struggling? Was it just because it was very concentrated, as you said, into the government workers and basically, legal migration, I guess people who contractors for the government? Was that the issue, was being funneled into that direction rather than the broader economy?
Yeah, so what we're finding, so we suspected, and we talked about it a little bit in our report, but we were even shocked at what's Elon Musk's DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, is finding in terms of the NGO system.
So is Trump behind the controlled demolition? That is kind of a
what triggers the most devastating
question we're going to ask in a minute, but what actually triggers recessions? This is from 5 months
recessions
ago.
Those that go beyond just a mere bubble bursting, and lead to a full-blown financial crisis. Examples like the 2008 crisis, where mortgage delinquency surged by an astonishing 657%, resulting in the implosions of banks like Lehman Brothers, who had total losses of $691 billion. Or consider the Great Depression, which left 25% of the workforce unemployed and forced those who retained their jobs to endure pay cuts averaging 42.5%. Imagine waking up to a stock market crash, watching your investments drop, and seeing your savings at risk. It sounds terrifying, right? And it is. But this has happened before, and there are clear warning signs that predict a financial crisis. From asset price bubbles to bank defaults, history offers clues. In this video, I'll share the key signs that a financial meltdown is on the horizon and what you can do to safeguard yourself. This is what always happens before a financial crisis. But before we get into the video, my name's Nolan Mathias, and if you want the truth about finances, the real truth, bubble bursting, I'm talking about real financial crises that can lead to devastation all over the globe. There is a very clear distinction between a recession and a financial crisis, and there are some things that always lead to an actual financial crisis. But before we can understand that, we need to understand the difference between a bubble bursting, a recession, and an actual full-blown financial crisis. Now, even though a recession can trigger a financial crisis for an individual, a recession is not a full-blown financial crisis when you look at it from a global perspective. So it's important to understand the difference. Things like the tulip craze, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and things like the dot-com bubble burst aren't necessarily financial crises. They can definitely lead to recessions, and they often do, but they aren't the real big problem. You see, when a bubble bursts, it's simply an overvalued investment that's collapsing. Take all of those whatever.com companies that were raising tons of money on the stock market but had little to no profits and no real future profit savings. It just means things get a little bit harder for a while. And typically it is defined by 2 quarters in a row with negative GDP. There's always bubble-like asset inflation. 2008, think about what was going on with real crisis, is when people start buying based on debt, and when the value of those assets goes down substantially, they don't have the money to pay back the loans, or they don't have the money to make the payments on them. And to me, there's one clear sign for this. When everyone starts telling me that you need to invest in something like gold or Bitcoin or tech stocks or buy real estate because it will only ever go up in value and you can buy it and have somebody else pay it off and everything will be just fine, that's usually a sign that a bubble is about to burst. And when people start saying, hey, don't worry about borrowing money to buy it because it can only go up in value, well, that's when things get crazy. And that's what leads to a financial crisis.
Borrow
in
money
fact,
to
put
buy
it really
gold
succinctly,
and silver.
it's when the stupid of the stupidest start buying into an investment idea and plowing all of their money into it. That's usually a pretty good sign that it's time to get out. Now, recognizing asset bubbles is actually not as hard as you might think. From tulips to tech stocks, speculation is what drives these crazes. I mean, just think of 1999 when everyone was buying companies like whatever.com, but none of these companies actually had any profits. But people sitting in coffee shops and bars were talking about their next big investment or their secret tip, and everyone was plowing money into these investments. It was pretty obvious that the value, the fundamentals for investing in them weren't there, which should have been a sign to most people that maybe it wasn't a good idea to buy. And these economic signals are often hidden in plain sight. You all remember the movie The Big Short, right? Well, do you remember the stripper scene? When the stripper, while dancing, was talking about all the properties that she owned and that she clearly could not afford.
What do you mean all your loans? We're talking about 2 loans on 1 house, right? I have 5 houses.
It's that kind of craziness that's a pretty good sign that a bubble is brewing. And then when you add in the debt components of it, of borrowing the money to buy those investments when everybody else is doing it, well, that's the fuel on the fire that will lead potentially to a financial crisis. And there's also leading indicators to this. Things like the LEI, the Leading Economic Index. Now, the LEI is put out by the Conference Board, and it has 10 components which are typically an indicator of a recession. And you can simply go on their website and look at the monthly forecasts and see whether or not we are in a place that could potentially lead to things turning the other way. And I'm not going to read you the 10 components of the LEI, but these are all very much leading indicators that could indicate that trouble is brewing ahead. And when you take a look at the LEI chart, it's very clear that there are often warning signals and recession signals that are in plain sight. And the red lines indicate that, yes, indeed, there is a recession signal there, which typically means that we're already in a recession. Now, not always, but typically. So when you know what to look for, the signs are almost always clearly there. Now, when it comes to a financial crisis, yes, that is almost always a recession. But there's some clear differences and some things you can look for in order to see a financial crisis coming where it may not be so obvious that a recession is on the way. So let's start with one of the clear warning signs, and that is speculation. And one of the best examples of this is the tulip bubble of the 1600s. Now, in the 1600s, tulips were often a symbol of wealth. In fact, in many cases, having one tulip meant you were rich, and having multiple tulips meant you were extremely wealthy. And of course, tulips really only bloom in the spring, which meant it wasn't something that you necessarily had year-round. But some really savvy investors decided that they were going to sell futures on tulips, which led to speculation over the price of tulips in the future, and that ultimately led to a disaster. And it's a disaster that we can use in order to understand the psychology that will lead us to be able to identify future crises. Because when everyone goes crazy and starts buying tulip futures, something that you can literally grow on your own, but you're buying the ability to own, when a tulip at the end of the day really doesn't have any other value than maybe perhaps a little bit of status if you were back in the 1600s, well, that's a pretty obvious sign that we've got a bubble brewing. It's exactly that. It's when things have independent of governments that clear as day if you know what to look for. The price of gold almost always follows the exact same speculative patterns. And the pattern is this: when consumer confidence falls significantly, the price of gold almost immediately negatively correlates to consumer confidence. So
I'm going to pause in there because his video is kind of long, and I think he's seeing the fact that people are putting more money into gold as a sign of a financial crisis.
Not just people, governments.
Exactly. Governments are putting money in. So this is my last video for the night. Is Trump actually crashing this economy on purpose?
Purposefully send our economy into a recession? Is he trying to crash the economy? Now, at first you may say, that's crazy, conspiracy theory, it makes no sense, and there's lots of reasons. But it's not because Trump necessarily is a bad guy, or he's evil, or anything else that people want to say, but there's actually a reason that could be very true on why he would do this. In fact, it may be important that he does. Why would it be good if they crashed the economy? Here's why Trump may be intentionally trying to crash the economy. And the reason could be very valid. You see, we all know that the government has taken on astronomical amounts of debt, but there's something else. 2025, we have $10 trillion that is coming due. But it's not just that it's coming due at interest rates that are double what we used to be paying. Right now, interest rates are really high due to inflation and mass government spending. $10 trillion represents 30% of our total debt. The United States debt, which is over $34 trillion, averages around 2.5% interest rate. Now, when 2025, $10 trillion hits, that is 30% roughly of the total amount of debt we have, interest rates have been as high as 4.7 and could even be higher by the time it hits. That represents hundreds of billions of dollars difference in how much we have to pay. Taxpayers will have to pay an astronomical amount at today's interest rates versus what they have been. Interest in 2024 payments a year were roughly $800 to $900 billion. Interest in 2025, even at a lower rate than those highs, would well be over $1.3 trillion. To put it into perspective, that payment is more than all the other main categories of government spending, maybe even more than Social Security. That means the US taxpayers will have to pay more on interest than our entire defense. Not only more, but hundreds of millions of more, and could potentially get up to twice as much, more than our health programs. And it could be more than our entire Social Security. So you can actually see why there's a massive incentive to get that interest rate down. But you can't unless the economy slows down. Why? Because we have inflation. And if you lower interest rates, economic activity picks up and inflation rises. So it's not something the Fed can just simply do. If they did, we could have hyperinflation.
Here's what happens. So I know this is a lot for you guys to take in. And your brains are like, if you're not used to financial discussion, this might be a little bit much. But the economy was in such a bad state that they had to keep interest rates at near record low of 0. And especially for the banks, you weren't getting 0. You might even, but you could have been getting 1 or 2%. These are historic numbers. I remember when they offered you 7% or 5% on a home loan. Like that was a good deal. It was a really good deal, right? Well, over the reason why all these home prices are going so high is that when the interest is down at 0 to 1, you can actually buy way more than just like a 5% difference. You know, the interest is so much money. You don't understand how. Maybe many of you understand how interest is calculated for a home, but it's not like any other kind of interest. It's diabolical. But you don't actually ever you can't pay it off like you could other things with interest. But when the economy just grew and grew and grew, and they're throwing money in it, and everybody's like BlackRock and Vanguard, and all these people are buying up all these properties and all these things at like 0 to 1%. Well, the Fed purposefully put the brakes on that. Okay. And the Fed raised interest rates on purpose. Okay. That's why a lot of people don't want to refinance. They can't refinance because interest rates are too high and there's no refinancing to be had. and they can't buy homes and things like that because of these interest rates. So if they lower interest rates again, then the money that they have thrown into the system, those guys have tons to play with. They're going to go buy more properties, which raises prices even higher. Okay, go ahead.
Way worse than anything we've ever seen. Inflation remains high because government spending has been so astronomical over the last 5 years. Now we have the problem. High interest rates that cannot simply be lowered, and $10 trillion or 30% of our government's debt coming due. One of the ways is we go into a recession. We have economic activity stall out, slow down. Unemployment rises. People go bankrupt. And in order to stop a recession, we lower interest rates. The Fed could then drop interest rates, so when we refi our 30% of national debt, it is at a level that saves taxpayers hundreds of billions of dollars. And it's not a one-year thing. That's hundreds of billions of dollars every single year for as long as that debt is due. So you're talking about trillions and trillions of dollars that we can't spend on other things. But even worse, because we can't afford the government today, we have to borrow to pay our bills. You increase debt by hundreds of billions more, which is more unaffordable. We have to borrow more debt to pay for the interest on the debt we already have. That could turn into a downward spiral, which would also make interest rates go higher because the government isn't reliable. Then every time we have to repay debt, interest rates are rising, and it puts us into a death spiral. Now, is that a good idea or not? I don't really know. And the question is, would short-term pain to save long-term catastrophic damage be worth it? Yes. But is that actually going to happen? Or could we somehow make it all work? But don't forget that 2025 is the beginning. $10 trillion is the start. Every year after, trillions more are coming due that we have to refinance. So what do you think? Would it be better for us to actually have a recession, drop interest rates, and make sure that we can manage the actual liabilities that we have? Or would it be better to refinance and keep the economy going? This is a big topic, and this is just a snapshot of why Trump may actually want to make a recession. So you want to understand even more? I made a whole playlist of economic topics and what.
So you, actually, I have one more little piece here I want to play with SOAR Financially. And he has on this guy, Jim Rogers. My mom wasn't impressed. She listened to him earlier, but he said something around the 14-minute mark. And I think there might even be back behind there, but around the 14-minute mark, he starts to, Jim is asked, where are you putting your money?
Apple's
and he says, honestly, he says, you have to go to my history.
Oh, okay.
He's like, I don't know what's going on. He literally says Trump is not predictable because Trump goes with the headlines of each day. So he's like, he doesn't have a financial.
You don't think that Trump has a plan that he, like even coming into office, that he would have a plan for this controlled demolition?
Go back just a little bit. I think that he thinks that he might, but he also goes by the headlines of the day.
What timestamp?
Around 14 minutes.
I think I'm there.
Just go back a little bit. Yeah. Okay, that should be good.
But I was basically trying to go around the world on my motorcycle, so I was soon off to China.
He's talking about the current
so he wasn't there.
Treasury Secretary.
We didn't have that much exposure. He was certainly enthusiastic. He was certainly eager. He certainly learned whatever he could, and he wanted to learn. Obviously, he wanted to learn a lot because
40 years ago, the current Treasury Secretary, Scott Bassett is how you say it, was an intern for this guy, Jim. And he's like, I didn't really know him, so I don't know what he's going to do.
See where he is now. He's not a journalist. And let's hope he knows what he's doing.
I was going to say, like, do you think he knows? And it's not an easy job. Refinancing the U.S. debt this year, I think $7 trillion that he needs to refinance this year alone. That's without all the extra deficit spending that might be happening. Does he have a chance to succeed?
Well, nobody has a chance to succeed. The numbers are overwhelming. The smartest guy, whoever you come up with is going to have problems dealing with the U.S. debt situation. This is not talking about Scott. This is talking about anybody and everybody, because the numbers are staggering and overwhelming. No country has ever had a situation like this, and I don't know what's going to happen. 100 years ago, it was Britain, and people said, oh, don't worry, the British pound is the gold standard for currencies. Believe it or not, 50 years later, 1976, Britain was bankrupt. They went from number one in 1925 or whatever that was to totally bankrupt in 1976, bailed out by the IMF. It has happened before in history, often, and it's going to happen again. I don't like saying it, but I can see what's coming.
Yeah, the writing is on the wall. The problem is we've been preaching about that since 2008, 2009. With all the money printing, the writing has been on the wall for the last 15 years, Jim, and we've been managing to kick the can down the road. You said, like, don't use the word different, but is it different this time? Like, are we misinterpreting real economy here?
Of course it's not different. It's never different this time. And I can add, I can subtract, I can not know the numbers. The numbers are going to overwhelm us, and at some point, it's going to be too late. It'll be on the evening news every day. The situation will be so dramatic. It's not there yet. Most people in the evening news don't know about the debt, but there will come a time when everybody will know about it. Oh my gosh. And that's called a serious bear market.
I have to ask you about DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, Jim. Do you see any chance that they will succeed and potentially trim at least some of that deficit spending to at least slow down the deficits here?
Well, they say they are. They say they have. They say they've done some already. But I've seen this movie before. This is not the first time that a new administration has come in and said, okay, we're going to solve the problem. Pretty soon people start saying, wait a minute, this is too much pain. This is a serious, serious problem. We cannot go that far. That's too much. And they back off and the situation gets worse. Maybe this time they will be serious. If they're really serious and they cut spending that dramatically, it's going to be a huge bear market. But that's why I don't think it will last, because when people start feeling a lot of pain, they start screaming and complaining and beating on the walls. And that's when people change their mind.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, at least the approach. At least somebody's trying to do something. That's my opinion. Whether it will succeed, we'll find out in 10 years probably. But at least somebody's trying something.
I just interrupt again slightly. I've heard this before. Yes, they're saying it. But they've said it every 4 years. They said it every 2 years. They always say it. Do they ever follow through? No, not when it gets to be painful.
Good point. Absolutely. Jim, on the debt side, there's two ways to sort of mitigate the debt. One is, of course, just stop spending and don't increase the debt load, but also just grow GDP. Productivity growth and other factors weigh in here. Do you see GDP developing in a positive way here? Just talking about the Atlanta Fed, for example, came out with some numbers that were actually negative due to gold imports, funny enough. What are your thoughts?
Well, the American economy has been expanding since 2008, 2009, and it's still going on. But I think I see signs that we're coming to an end. Whether I see it or not doesn't matter. I know that this economy will slow down somewhere along the line. I know that historically we're getting there already. And when it happens, it's going to be terrible because the debt is so unbelievably high now. And we're all going to scream.
Now, I think the voices are getting louder here, but just to drill down a little bit on that.
I think that is like the last thing to say for the show tonight. It's going to be painful, and we're all going to scream. And he wasn't just saying himself. And there's another part of the video where he is talking about Trump, and he says, I don't know what to predict for you right now. I don't know what to predict. I don't know what to tell you. Because he's like, hey, do you have any investments, or where would you put it? Would you put it in gold and silver? He goes, I don't know. What's this? I can't predict this. Trump's unpredictable. This is insane. This is insane, basically, is what he says. And I kind of like his matter of factness. Mm-hmm. And I like when he pushed back on the stupid Doge cuts, because the interest on our debt is literally like, what did he say? Like 2 or 3 times what the Doge cuts are even right now.
Yeah, just the interest.
And Elon wanted to send out checks on, you would need to have cut 1 point something trillion. And you could, if you got rid of, this is what Trump wants to do. How can we get a 0% interest on credit card for the nation? So there's got to be, we'll do the 3%. Mm-hmm. We'll do the 3% transfer.
Right.
We'll pay that. Okay. But I don't even think we could. I don't think we could, because it's either 7 or 10. Both guys had 2 different numbers. I don't know if you caught what these men were saying. These are things that they don't tell the kids. Don't tell the kids that we are in the 20th mortgage refinancing of the house and they're coming to take it away. Don't tell the kids. Where are the kids? Don't tell them that Scott Bassinet, the gay guy, has to try to renegotiate with somebody another loan. We're $34 trillion in debt, but there's between 7 and 10 that has to be refinanced. So he has to go shopping to who is going to refinance this debt. Is it going to be China? Will it be Saudi Arabia? Who's going to finance $7 to $10 trillion for us? The interest of which is in the billions and billions of dollars. So, you know, somebody else, I watched another video. I'm going to end with this. Michelle can, this is kind of an aside. Somebody said, don't worry, Leah. I read an article. They didn't say this to me. That's what I took it personal. Most of the debt we own. The American people own it. Owe it. And so that is some sort of shenanigans that even quantum physics, cannot wrap my brain around. They're like, Leah, and they're not saying my name, I know this. They're showing a chart. There's a chart, and I'll bring up the chart, of who owes the debt. The American taxpayers. The American taxpayers owe the debt to themselves.
Let me tell you something. Do you know why private equity companies that you all are very, very well versed in now, and you had no idea you were going to come and get a lesson on something that you didn't even know existed until tonight? The U.S. government is the private equity company.
Infograph.
And the American citizen is the company.
Mm-hmm.
What they have done is they have bought us, and then they use us as equity. They use your job as equity. They use your retirement as equity. And what they do is they take that equity and then they get loans in your name.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have to pay it back. You have to pay it back. And guess what else? They take the fees. They hire themselves. Do you see how this works?
Mm-hmm.
So the private equity companies probably started because they looked at what the government was doing on the backs of the U.S. citizen and decided, well, wait a minute. If the U.S. government is doing this to citizens, why can't we do this with companies? Why can't we sell out companies and get loans in their name so that we don't have to pay back the loans and we can hire ourselves because we own them? Do you see how this works? So we as the U.S. citizens,
it's treasury bonds and things like that,
are paying. Well, it's just anything. Mm-hmm. The U.S. government takes out loans in our name with us and our jobs as the equity.
Mm-hmm.
And then what's worse is they do sell us off in pieces, and they don't care about us, and they keep cycling through American citizens.
Mm-hmm.
So the private equity scheme was founded first by the U.S. government.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we are, see, here's the thing. You and I are like, wait a minute. I'm not trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars in debt. I never agreed to this. But just like the story of Joseph in the Bible, we came and we sold ourselves to the government. Because we were starving, because we wanted more, because that's what we decided to go along with it. And we kept electing these corrupt people that were willing to sell off the heart of the American citizen. So I do have hope for you.
Yeah.
I don't want this to end on a bad note. What I see coming, I wish to God that he had allowed the economy to just do what needed to happen in 2008. And I have been praying for this day that is coming for the past 17 years. I've been begging God, just let it fall. Let the Jenga game fall. Because here's the deal. You and I are operating with like two broken arms. They're out of joint. And we can't do much. It's very difficult and it's very painful. And we need these arms reset. But it's going to be very, very painful to have the arms reset. And it's going to be very, very painful to have our arms in casts while they heal from being reset. And so nobody has wanted to go through that process. They're like, well, I can just kind of get around with these like halfway broken arms. And I don't want to go through not being able to use them at all while they're casted. And I certainly don't want to go through the pain because I'm not going to get an anesthetic during the reset. But then you just spend the rest of your life with deformed arms that don't work right. And so we have to be willing to go through the reset. And what's more, essentially we're saying that we're willing for our kids to have the same broken arms that we have because we aren't willing to go through the pain that would make it so that they have proper arms. We can't live like this anymore. And the sooner we can get through this, the sooner we can be done. You know, Uncle Jack was supposed to have a knee surgery in January and we couldn't get it done. And if we had been able to get that knee surgery done, he would be well into like pretty much done with the bulk of the hard part of the physical therapy. But now because of different, commitments and stuff like that, we're not going to be able to get that surgery scheduled until June, which puts out, the rehab. And I just want him to be able to get through all of that. But the longer you kick the can down the road and we're stuck because, we have commitments that we can't, we have to be able to commit to him a solid 2 months of physical therapy of taking him to rehab and stuff. But my point is, the sooner we can get it done, the sooner we can be on the healing side. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wanting this whole thing to go. But like I've been saying on the show, and it's not for any selfish reason. If you are still some reason can't let go of holding on to this paper dollar and you just I can't let go for the God's money. Let today be the day that you let it go. I'm dead serious because God has been gracious enough to allow this thing to go out long enough that if there are any Resistance Chicks viewers left still hanging on to your 401k and your IRAs and your stocks or just your paper dollar in your savings account because you just can't let it go because you're so afraid, God is giving you ample time because I'm telling you something, when this thing happens, you're going to go, oh my gosh, I should have. And I don't want you to do that. Now, one thing must be said, and I don't say this enough on the show, so I'm sorry. If you have money in your bank account or at home, and you're going to need that to live on, mm-hmm. please do not buy gold and silver. Mm-hmm. Okay? Just keep that. And yes, the value will be diminished, but you're going to need it to live on because when you put your money in gold and silver, which that is going to go up, but when you put your money in gold and silver, and Zhang Enterprises will tell you this, it's not one of those things like you want to just have so that you can liquidate really fast. Mm-hmm. Okay. It's wealth preservation. This is money that you weren't going to touch anyway. Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's keep that in mind. So I want to make sure that that's very clear. So I have a couple of announcements here. Not that it matters.
Such a late show tonight.
To anybody on our show, but it matters to me. And it will matter to Leah and to Patriot Gallery and maybe to a couple of people that go way back on Resistance Chicks. But one of our viewers from very, very, very long time, his name is Robert Bone. While we were going live, I got an email from his son. He's been battling cancer for a very long time, and he has passed away. Aww. And Robert used to send us flowers on Valentine's Day or for our birthday. He used to send us Honey Baked Ham Company hams. He used to send us Omaha steaks. And he was one of our biggest fans. He once wrote me a poem. He had a sword that was made that had Resistance Chicks or Mass Faith 3 put on it. That was he was one of our most devoted.
He did horses.
Viewers, and he had horses, and maybe it's not. What is it? I'm so sorry. It may not be cancer. Forgive me if I get this wrong, and nobody knows out there unless his son, who just emailed me, is watching. I think it was actually diabetes because he was on diet. I think he was going to dialysis often. But whatever it was, and I should know that, and I'm sorry that I don't. But whatever it was, he is with Jesus now.
Oh, he's a strong Christian.
Yes, he was a very strong Christian. So we are praising God for a soul well-lived and very enthusiastic about Resistance Chicks and very encouraging.
It was just such an encouragement, and then to send the appreciation, especially in the early days of Mass Faith 3 when we were just taking off and flying high,
And he had kind of pulled back because I think, battling the illness, but still, I think as soon as, 4 or 5 months ago, I would see a comment here or there, really? Still love you on Facebook. Yeah. So just praising God that, his soul is with Jesus and celebrating a life that, at least in some small way contributed to our life and touched our life. And the fact that his son said that, let me just pull up this email here.
He even emailed you to let you know. That's
he emailed
so
me.
Nice.
He said, I moved with him at the turn of the year. The plan was to sell my home and move in with him for about 6 months, then figure out what was next. He passed away peacefully at home. As you can imagine, I am beside myself, so forgive the brief email. Dad loved your family and spoke of you guys often. Thank you for touching my dad's life and bringing a smile to his face. Love from Louisiana, Brockwell, Bone. And so I just want to, I'll go ahead and show you guys his picture. From the obituary. So there's Robert right there.
Oh, well, we will make this in remembrance of Robert.
Yes.
Bone.
It says Robert Harley Bone, Jr., born Friday. I don't give all these details, but he's passed away now. He was 68 years old. He will be remembered for his love of the outdoors, adventurous spirit, and friendships he's built over the years. In his early years, he enjoyed building and flying model rockets and control line airplanes, along with riding dirt bikes. Robert loved hunting, fishing, and camping, where he found peace, joy, and serenity in nature. He was also a member of the Boy Scouts of America, along with his son Brockwell, where he taught Brock love of the outdoors. As an adult, Robert enjoyed operating his John Deere tractor and gardening. Robert was also a regular at Frank's Restaurant in Louisiana, where he was sure to share a story or a good laugh with friends. He is preceded in death, but I don't want to leave all the details there. Cherished moments with his family and friends will live on in the hearts of those who knew him. We love you, Robert, and we will, and you will be deeply missed. So, just praising God for that life that was a part of ours for so long.
Yeah,
and Baker Mom says, "I remember him. We will meet him someday." That's awesome, Baker Mom. That makes me happy. That puts a smile on my face. So, Brockwell, thank you for sending us that email, and we will let's pray for Brockwell and his family. So, Father God, we thank you so much for Robert and his family and his friends and his loved ones. And I can only imagine, a life being taken so young is going to be very much mourned. And so we just lift up his son, who said, he's beside himself with grief. I can only imagine what that is like. And so we just pray that you wrap him in your arms of love and show him what that true Heavenly Father hug is, and show him what Robert is experiencing in heaven with you in glory. No more pain, no more suffering, no more dialysis or anything like that. So we just thank you for all of this. And we thank you for the blessing that he was to us and to the Resistance Chicks family. And so, Father God, as much as we can bless his family, we do so. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
So a couple of you in the chat have mentioned the JFK files.
Yeah, we'll probably do that on Friday show.
We will do it tomorrow night with Barry Jones. I set that up while we were. I know Leah had a Revelation Red Pill plan, but we're gonna postpone that, and we're gonna do a live show with Uncle Barry. He is been on our show a couple of times. I set that up literally while we were doing the show here tonight. So it'll be at 8 p.m. tomorrow night. He's the author of The Treasonous Cabal, probably one of a handful of books this size that I've read in my life. I literally have read this book in my hand from cover to cover. And we've had Uncle Barry, we call him Uncle Barry because he's our best friend's uncle. But we've had Uncle Barry on the show 2 or 3 times now. And every single time it is just phenomenal, mind-blowing. And what happened is he would be telling us stories when they would come up to visit our friend. And we would...
Did you get back with Chuck?
Yes. Okay. I just emailed them last night.
Okay.
What happened was we would be at our friend's house and they would be up in town visiting, and we would just be enthralled. And so we asked if we could do an interview. So we actually did a sit down in-person interview, which was really, really good. And then we've had Uncle Barry on our show. But now that the JFK files have dropped, I want to get a firsthand, look at what Uncle Barry thinks. He's one of the most authoritative figures on this subject. He knows it in and out. He has taught it to his high school students, and he also has an online homeschool curriculum that he does, Standards plus history.
Yes, very
well, we'll talk about that tomorrow. So just set that up. I know most of you guys have been like, what's with the JFK files? There's 80,000 pages, and most of them are supposedly unredacted. And, people are already posting all over social media, well, it looks like our government killed the president. And, yeah, probably did. So we'll have Barry Jones on tomorrow, the author of The Treasonous Cabal, live with us. So I would like a special prayer. I want everybody that is listening to the sound of my voice right now, from now until tomorrow, your prayer, besides, for praying for, your own issues. But as you remember, please bind and gag Satan from attacking the tech. we don't have very many people on live anymore because it messes up.
Yeah.
And so we're going to rebuke that in the name of Jesus, and it's going to go well, and you guys are going to pray into that, and you're just going to pray a hedge of protection over the tech, and it's going to go smoother than it does even on our regular live shows in the name of Jesus.
Amen.
So I'm very excited about that. All right, so we'll do you have any other announcements, Leah, besides that? Last night, we did a show for St. Patrick's Day, which was really good. So if you missed it, I want you guys to go and check that out. The Miraculous Life of the Real St. Patrick. I think you guys will enjoy it. Those of you that saw it already have given good positive feedback. So let's see. So we'll have Uncle Barry on tomorrow night. And then on Friday's show, we'll just be doing, there's always the regular week of news. But remember, Patriot Gallery's birthday is on Sunday. We will still do a show, a world news program on Sunday. But if you think about it, you can pray that she has a wonderful birthday weekend. I'm very excited about her birthday and celebrating the miracle that she is and everything that God has done over the past year. So it's a very significant day for us this Sunday. And then on Monday night, we will be doing an Outliers with G. Edward Griffin. So you guys, so you want to talk about the economy? We will hit it hard. You want to talk about what's coming? We're going to get the professional in the room who is sharper than attack. He's been on our show twice so far. This will make number 3.
Yeah, we got a couple.
So we've got a lot going on. Patriot Gallery says, Jubilee, people, I'll try to, she said she was rushed in writing this, so I'll try to make sure that there's no errors when I read it. People and families will return to their rightful land. Call on God. He will help you find your great-great-granddaddy's land, who bought it with gold and silver, real money. This is your legal inheritance. She says, talk to God about it. He'll answer you. She says, I'm really serious. God is just and fair and honest. Justice is coming. The system has been a lie. It's been a delusion. It's been counterfeit and fake and phony because of
the printing of money.
The printing of money.
It
does not exist. She says, my parents were born in 1926 and 29. They were under this strong delusion. Even though they both had used gold and silver and gold certificates, they saw what Nixon did in Johnson's removal of silver out of money. She says it killed my dad as a cost accountant at the age of 54 in 1981. Subconsciously, he knew what was going on. It is real. So well said, Mom. That's very, very good. All right, we're going to say goodnight. We're going to say goodbye. Don't forget, if you do have those paper dollars and you would like to ask somebody about how you get out of the paper dollar, resistancechicks.com/God's money and schedule your call with Zhang Enterprises today. They will answer all your questions.
But if you go to shop.resistancechicks.com, even if life stinks, you don't need to.
Leah.
So get the deodorant, the Oil of Joy Perfume Day Jesus deodorant.
Right. And if you want to get the Perfume Day Jesus deodorant.
And we have a promo code for St. Patrick's Day, which is Patrick. Save 10% so that you don't have to stink while the economy stinks.
Okay. You're the one product that you want to advertise for. How many do we have left? 4.
I'll make some
4.
more. I will.
And who makes the deodorant around here?
Me. I'll make
and
it.
And who asked you to make us extra deodorant last week?
More.
If you order, she'll make.
If you order, we'll make some more. We're sending them out. I don't want anybody to stink while the economy stinks.
Leah did ask me at the end of the St. Patrick's show last night to just randomly, so I did put it on there. There's a promo code Patrick. It'll last for the next week.
Save yourself 10%.
I told Leah I don't want to do sales all the time at every holiday because I don't want you guys to be pressured at every holiday.
There, so now let people use it.
Okay, promo code Patrick. Save 10%. All right. We love you guys. God loves you. God bless. Remember, it's not just a conspiracy theory if it's actually the truth. And the 2008 is going to happen all over again. And you need to be prepared. Oh, before I go, I actually have a scripture for this. This is very important. Proverbs 22. A good name is to be chosen rather than riches. Loving favor rather than silver and gold. The rich and the poor have this in common. The Lord is the maker of them all. A prudent man foresees evil and hides himself.
Yes.
But the simple passes on and are perished. But humility and the fear of the Lord are riches and honor and life. The scripture there specifically is Proverbs 22. A prudent man foresees evil and hides himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. I'm telling you, the prudent man in this hour right now, you are seeing what's coming and you are doing something about it, whether that is just getting your heart right, getting your life right, getting your familial relationships right, closing off doors that need to be closed, opening doors that need to be opened, all of those things. You need to see the writing on the wall, and whatever it is that the Lord is leading you to do to prepare for it, make sure that you are not slack in doing that. Okay.
And you get the Perfume Day Jesus deodorant so you can smell out a rat, but not smell like a rat.
I don't even know how to say that.
We were sniffing out some rats tonight.
Leah,
But you don't want to smell like one.
Guys, we've reached the slap
Guaranteed.
Happy. We've reached the slap happy.
You will not smell like a rat.
Oh my gosh.
Guaranteed.
Ballistic Mystic says, usually people have to remortgage to remodel homes before they are paid off. That's like the number one on the birth certificate being on the stock numbers. Now the equity fund, these are 3 different comments, we've become, is transferred to the new world order you are. Sharon says, Trump has said in the past, we are already in reality, in a recession. He also said, even doing everything we can, it could get worse. A depression. Yeah, amen.
He actually, just to end on the positive note, said there will be pain.
He did say there will be pain. Baker Mom says, Leah, you're a poet.
Thank you.
You guys are so fun. They're all laughing at you. I can't with this. I can't with this one.
When the economy starts to tank, resistance chicks you will thank for preparing you during any wind or weather.
So that you don't stank.
No, we have to rhyme with weather.
I was with the tank and thank and stank. Okay.
Well, if you take, we're near the autophagy here, you can be light as a feather.
Baker Mom, you are just the cutest. All right. She says, Michelle, why don't you blow us a kiss at the end of the show anymore? I'm going to tell you why I don't. And I used to do it for every single show.
You're going to tell them why. It's midnight and you're going to tell them why because it's hilarious.
Because there were people of the opposite gender, and I thought it was innocent because I am innocent to the pure, all things are pure.
Oh my word, I forgot about this.
That were receiving it.
They said, Michelle, how can you keep me from falling in love with you? You blow me kisses at the end of every show.
This show has just devolved.
It's like this generation. This generation, she's blowing kisses at me. She is in my computer. They literally like, you are blowing kisses at me. And Michelle's like, you know what? That just needs to stop because
it was my thing for like 7 years. And then all of a sudden I was just like, well, I don't know. Oh, you got accused of being a tease, says Chris. Yeah, I did.
You were blowing the kisses at me. You broke my heart.
Big Rom says, oh my, I don't know what to say, rolling on the floor laughing. Chris says, rat terriers have exceptional sniffers and great immune systems. Total honesty, we're actually thinking and praying, we'll see, about getting one. Glenda Hobbs says, night, night, you two. You are so fun. We are so blessed. I love you too, Glenda. Glenda is one of our monthly supporters, and I know that it's not appropriate to thank everybody online all the time, but Glenda, thank you. I just actually deposited your check this afternoon. So I do want to say thank you. Just saw your name.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. You guys are awesome.
All right. Remember, it's not just a conspiracy theory, if it's actually the truth. We love you. God loves you. God bless. We'll see you next time right here from ResistanceChicks.com. Baker Mom, I love you.